The pink highlighter screamed from across the kitchen counter. Final notice. 3 words that had haunted Natalie Brooks for 6 days straight. Ever since the utility company had decided her $194 past due was no longer a polite suggestion, but a threat. The bill sat propped against her coffee maker like a tombstone, casting judgment on her instant Folgers, her burnt toast, her entire carefully budgeted life that was currently collapsing at the rate of $8.73 per day in accumulated late fees. She was 26 years old and drowning. The October morning light filtered through her studio apartment window in Dorchester. That particular quality of New England autumn sun that promised beauty but delivered cold. Natalie stood at her kitchen counter in sweatpants and an oversized nursing school t-shirt from 2 years ago, back when she still believed she would finish her degree, back when her mother was still alive to tell her that kindness and hard work would somehow be enough. Her mother had been wrong about that. The photo on the refrigerator caught her eye as she scraped the burnt parts off her toast. 3 faces frozen in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Natalie at 19, sun-kissed and smiling. Her mother, radiant and healthy, before the cancer had turned her skin the color of old newspaper. Riley, her little sister, gap-toothed and grinning at 11 years old, before she understood that their family was held together by borrowed time and minimum wage jobs. That photo was taken at a beach somewhere south of Boston. Natalie could not remember which one. What she remembered was her mother laughing, actually laughing, and how rare that sound had become in those final months, when every breath was a negotiation with pain, and every medical bill was a new impossibility. The nursing school t-shirt felt like sandpaper against her skin. She had dropped out halfway through her second year, Dean's List straight A's meaning nothing. When your mother is dying, and someone needs to work 40 hours a week to pay for medications that only delay the inevitable, the school had been understanding. The loan companies had not been. $2,380.76 worth of understanding, compounding interest included. Her phone buzzed. Riley. The name alone made Natalie's chest tighten. 7:15 in the morning on a Tuesday meant only one thing. Her sister needed money. Natalie answered. Hey, Riles, you're up early? Riley's voice came through small and apologetic, the voice of someone who has learned that asking for help is a form of violence against the people you love. Nat, I'm sorry to call so early. I know you're probably getting ready for work. It's fine, what's up? The pause was 3 seconds long. Natalie had learned to measure her sister's pauses the way sailors measure storms. 3 seconds meant moderate need. 5 seconds meant desperation. Riley's pauses had been getting longer lately. I need $300 for textbooks, Bio 201 and Organic Chem. My professor says if I don't have the books by Thursday, I can't stay in the class. Thursday was 2 days away. Natalie's bank account currently held $112.47. Her tips from last night's shift at Harbor Light Diner had added $63 to that total, but she needed $80 minimum to cover gas and groceries for the week. The math was simple and brutal. There was no version of this equation where everyone got what they needed. When Thursday? Natalie asked, already knowing the answer would not help. Morning. First thing. Nat, I tried to find used copies, but they're all gone. I tried the library, but there's a wait list. I even asked my roommate if I could share hers, but she needs it for the same class. Natalie closed her eyes and did the math again, hoping somehow the numbers would shift in her favor. They did not. They never did. I'll figure it out, Riles, I promise. You sure? Because I can ask around, maybe someone can lend me. No, I've got it. Focus on studying, okay? I'll send it tomorrow. Riley's relief was audible. A small exhalation of breath that made Natalie want to scream and cry and punch something all at once. I love you, Nat. Thank you. For everything. For always. Love you too. Now go ace that chemistry test. Natalie hung up and stared at the pink highlighted bill. $300 for Riley. $194 for the utility company. $40 for gas. $60 for food. Add it all up, and she needed $594 by Thursday. She would make maybe $200 in tips this week if she was lucky, and the customers were generous, and the universe decided to throw her a single, undeserved break. The gap was $394 wide. The gap was impossible. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. That last conversation in the hospice room, when the morphine made her philosophical and the cancer made her honest. Natalie, baby, don't sacrifice yourself for everyone else. You deserve to be seen too. But who sees a waitress drowning in debt? Natalie grabbed her coat and her keys and headed out the door, leaving the pink bill on the counter like a dare. Harbor Light Diner sat on the corner of Shawmut Avenue and West Brookline, a squat brick building from the 1950s wedged between gentrified condos that cost more per month than Natalie made in a year. The neon sign out front had been dying slowly for a decade. Half its letters burnt out, so it read H blank, RBO blank, L, IGH blank, DI blank ER. A perfect metaphor for the slow decay of everything Natalie touched. Inside, the diner smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease and lemon-scented floor cleaner, that particular combination of scents that had soaked into Natalie's hair and clothes and skin, until she could not remember what she smelled like without it. The morning rush was already building. Construction workers at table 1, loud and generous. An elderly couple at table 2, married 50 years, sharing one omelet to make their fixed income stretch. A businessman at table 4, always on his phone, never tipping more than 10% no matter how perfect the service. Table 6, the corner booth near the kitchen, was empty. Natalie's favorite table. Quiet, out of the way, the kind of spot where people who wanted to be invisible could sit and eat in peace. Frank Patterson, the manager, stood behind the counter looking like a man who had given up on sleep somewhere around 2008. He was 45, divorced, 2 kids he saw every other weekend, coffee-stained shirt and perpetual stress lines carved into his face like scars. He was not a bad man. He was just a man crushed by the weight of other people's expectations and corporate policies that valued efficiency over humanity. "You're 20 minutes late," Frank said without looking up from his order pad. Again. "Sorry, Frank, bus was—" "Save it. Table 3 is waiting." Natalie tied her apron and grabbed her order pad and slipped into the mechanical rhythm of service. Smile, greet, take order, deliver food, refill coffee, clear plates, repeat. The routine was numbing and familiar, a form of meditation through labor. She had been doing this for 3 years, ever since dropping out of nursing school, and she had learned that the secret to surviving was to make yourself invisible. Be pleasant but forgettable. Be efficient but not too fast. Be present but not actually there. Elena Cruz appeared beside her at the coffee station, whispering in the way that only best friends and fellow survivors can whisper, a language of shared exhaustion and unspoken understanding. Elena was 28, Dominican-American, fierce and protective, supporting a disabled mother with MS and paying off her brother's legal fees from a wrongful arrest that had cost $18,000 to overturn. She had been working at Harbor Light for 5 years, a psychology degree on her wall in hash slinging in her hands. The American dream in reverse. "You look like death," Elena said, pouring coffee into 2 cups simultaneously. "Rough night? Riley needs $300. Elena's face shifted through 3 emotions in 2 seconds: sympathy, understanding, guilt. She had her own sister's problems to fund. "Want me to lend you?" "No, you've got your mom. I'll figure it out." "You always figure it out. That's the problem. You keep figuring it out until there's nothing left of you to figure." Natalie did not have an answer for that, so she picked up her coffee pot and moved back into the dining room, refilling cups and collecting tips and pretending that the math in her head would somehow solve itself. At 11:47 in the morning, the door chimed and an old man walked in. Natalie noticed him immediately, the way you notice things that do not quite fit. He was late 80s, maybe older, the kind of elderly where age has compacted the body down into something fragile and essential. He wore a tweed coat that was clean but worn through at the elbows, a white button-down shirt pressed with the kind of care that suggested a life lived alone, leather shoes that had been polished, but whose soles were separating from the uppers. He stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the diner with pale blue watery eyes, and then he walked directly to table 6 as if he had been there 1,000 times before. Natalie approached with her order pad and her professional smile, the one that did not quite reach her eyes. "Morning, sir. Sit anywhere you like." The man looked at table 6 specifically, his hand resting on the back of the booth. "May I sit here?" It was an odd question. The diner was half empty. He could sit anywhere. But something in his voice, that papery, formal quality of someone who did not speak much anymore, made Natalie soften. Of course. He sat carefully, like his bones hurt, and folded his hands on the table in front of him. His hands trembled slightly. Parkinson's, maybe, or just age, or loneliness, which Natalie had learned could be a physical condition. She brought him a menu and a glass of water. He studied the menu for a full minute, reading carefully, or perhaps calculating what he could afford. "I'll have black coffee, please," he said finally, "and wheat toast, dry." The total was $4.50. He could have ordered the daily special, 2 eggs and bacon and toast for $7.95, but he ordered the minimum, the cheapest items on the menu. Natalie brought his coffee and toast. He thanked her in that same papery voice, formal and distant, and she moved on to her other tables. But something about him kept pulling her attention back. The way he sat very still, the way he read his newspaper, 3 days old, probably from the library, the way he drank his coffee in tiny sips, making it last. He looked dignified. He looked alone. He looked invisible. When he was ready to pay, he pulled out a worn billfold and counted exact change. Quarters, dimes, nickels, arranged in small, careful piles. He left $5 on the table for a $4.50 bill, 50 cents tip. Exactly 50 cents. As he stood to leave, Natalie was struck by a sudden, inexplicable urge to say something, anything, to break through that wall of formal isolation. But what could she say? What do you say to a stranger whose loneliness is so profound you can see it hanging on him like a coat? "Thank you, sir," she said instead. "Have a good day." The old man paused at the door and looked back at her, really looked at her, for just a moment. Then he nodded once and left. Elena appeared at her elbow. "New regular?" "Maybe," Natalie said, watching through the window as the old man walked down the street, shoulders straight despite the weight of years. Something about him. What? He looked invisible, like no one's really seen him in years. Elena laughed, not unkindly. "Honey, half our customers are invisible. Welcome to the poverty diner." But Natalie could not shake the feeling that this particular invisibility was different, more profound, more chosen. She pocketed the 50-cent tip and moved on to her next table. But later that night, as she counted her tips and did the impossible math of Riley's textbooks and the pink highlighted bill, she thought about that old man and wondered if 50 cents was all he could afford, or if he was budgeting his kindness the same way she budgeted her survival. 2 days later, Thursday morning, 11:47 exactly, the old man returned. Same time, same table, same order. Black coffee, dry wheat toast. $4.50 total, $5 payment, 50 cents tip. This time, Natalie paid attention. His coat had a pin on the lapel. Boston College, class of 1958. His newspaper was still 3 days old. His hands shook more when he lifted his coffee cup. But his posture was straight. His clothes were clean. His shoes were polished. He had pride. He had dignity. He had nothing else. When Natalie brought his coffee refill, complimentary, she said, "Here you go, sir, on the house." He looked up, making eye contact for the first time, and something in his pale blue eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe, or surprise that someone had noticed him at all. "That's very kind of you, miss." His voice was like old paper, thin and formal, the voice of someone from a different era when please and thank you were not optional. "You're welcome. I'm Natalie, by the way." The old man paused, considering whether to offer his name in return. He did not, but he said, "Thank you, Natalie." And the way he said her name, carefully and deliberately, made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in months. After he left, Natalie found herself looking forward to Saturday, wondering if he would come back, wondering if this was the beginning of a pattern or just 2 random acts of lonely people intersecting briefly before moving on. Saturday, 11:47, the old man returned. This time he brought a different newspaper, still old, October 23rd edition, with a crossword puzzle partially completed in pen, bold pen, confident crossword solver. He also brought reading glasses held together with tape. Natalie felt something warm and unfamiliar in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the pleasure of seeing someone again after wondering if you would. "How's the crossword?" she asked, setting down his coffee. He looked surprised that she had spoken, that she had noticed. "Challenging. 37 across has me stumped." Natalie leaned over, careful not to invade his space. "May I see?" The clue read Fitzgerald's J. "Oh," Natalie said, smiling. Gatsby, the Great Gatsby. The old man's face brightened, just slightly, like sun through clouds. Of course, thank you. He wrote it in with careful letters and looked up at her. Did you study Fitzgerald in school? Yeah, senior year. I loved that book. Did you? What did you love about it? No one had asked Natalie a question like that in years. Not what do you want to order, or when is your rent due, or can you cover my shift? But a real question about thoughts and feelings and the kind of literature that makes you believe the world can be beautiful, even when it is breaking your heart. I don't know, she said slowly, remembering herself at 17, reading by flashlight under her covers, dreaming of a life bigger than the one she had been born into. The hope, I guess. Gatsby kept believing things could be better, even when they couldn't. The old man studied her face with those pale blue eyes, and for a moment, Natalie felt truly seen. Not as a waitress or a debtor or a dropout, but as a person who had read Gatsby and understood something essential about futile hope. Yes, he said quietly, the hope, even futile hope, is beautiful. There was something in the way he said it, a weight of personal experience, that made Natalie want to ask more. But Frank was gesturing from across the diner, impatient, and she had other tables waiting, so she just said, Are you a teacher? You seem like a teacher. The old man's expression shifted, memory and loss crossing his face like shadows. I was. English, high school, long time ago. Did you like it? I loved it. The students made me feel... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Visible. There it was again, that word, visible. Do you miss it? The old man looked down at his crossword puzzle, at Gatsby written in careful block letters, and said very quietly, Every day. After he left, Elena found Natalie standing by the coffee station, staring at nothing. You're getting attached to the old guy, Elena said. He's just... Natalie could not find the right words. He seems so alone. So are half our customers, Nat. You can't save everyone. I know, but I can be kind. Elena's expression softened. She understood. They both lived in a world where kindness was a luxury most people could not afford, which made it precious when you found it, even in small doses, even 50 cents worth. The old man came back Tuesday, then Thursday, then Saturday, always 11:47, always table 6, always coffee and toast, $4.50, $5, 50 cents tip. Natalie started saving table 6 for him, turning away other customers with excuses about reservations that did not exist. Frank noticed, but did not say anything. Even Frank, ground down by corporate policies and divorce settlements, recognized that some human rituals were sacred. On the fourth visit, Tuesday, October 29th, the old man brought a current newspaper, not 3 days old, current, as if he had bought it instead of finding it at the library. And he coughed throughout his meal, a deep rattling cough that sounded like pneumonia or worse. Natalie brought him extra honey packets without being asked. For your tea, she said. Honey helps coughs. The old man looked at the honey packets, then at Natalie, and something in his eyes went soft. You're very thoughtful. My mom used to make me honey tea when I was sick. Used to? She passed 8 months ago. The old man's face filled with genuine sorrow, the kind that only comes from understanding loss personally. I'm very sorry, that must be terribly hard. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She did not cry at work. She did not cry anywhere. Crying was a luxury she could not afford. Yeah, she managed. It is. She raised you well, the old man said gently. That's a legacy. And somehow, those simple words, spoken by a stranger in a worn tweed coat over $4.50 worth of coffee and toast, broke something open in Natalie's chest. Her mother had raised her well. Her mother had taught her to see people, really see them, even when the world insisted they were invisible. Thank you, Natalie whispered. The old man nodded and returned to his coffee, and they sat in comfortable silence, two invisible people who had somehow found each other in the machinery of a world that did not care whether they lived or died. Halloween fell on a Thursday. Natalie wore cat ears to make the children smile, a small gesture toward joy in a joyless season. The old man came at 11:47 wearing no costume, but he smiled, actually smiled, when he saw her ears. Festive, he said. Gotta embrace joy where you can find it, right? A wise philosophy. Natalie felt bold that day. Maybe because of the cat ears. Maybe because 3 weeks of 50-cent tips had built a foundation of trust. "Can I ask you something personal?" The old man looked up from his menu. "You may ask. I may not answer." Do you have family, kids?" The pause was longer than 3 seconds, longer than 5, a full 10 seconds of silence heavy enough to sink ships. "I had a brother once," he said finally. "Had? We don't speak, haven't for many years." "I'm sorry, that must be lonely." The old man's pale blue eyes went distant, looking at something 40 years away. "Loneliness is a choice I made. Pride is an expensive currency." Natalie understood that. She understood it better than she wanted to. Pride had kept her from asking for help when her mother was dying. Pride had kept her working 2 jobs instead of accepting charity. Pride was the thing that kept you warm at night when you had nothing else, and the thing that froze you to death by morning. "I have a sister," Natalie offered. "Riley, she's in college." "You must be proud." "I am, but it's hard. I'm supposed to help her financially, but I can barely help myself." The old man set down his coffee cup with great care. "You're a good sister. That's worth more than money." Natalie laughed, a bitter sound. "Try paying rent with good intentions." "Kindness is currency too, Natalie. Don't forget that." The way he said it, serious and certain, made her want to believe him. But believing in the currency of kindness was how you ended up broke and alone with a pink highlighted bill on your kitchen counter. Saturday, November 2nd. The old man wore a tie. Navy blue, slightly frayed, but formal. Dressed up. Natalie noticed immediately. "Special occasion?" she asked. The old man straightened his tie with trembling fingers. "It's my birthday." Natalie's heart clenched. "Happy birthday. How old?" 87. "Are you celebrating? Family coming?" His smile was the saddest thing Natalie had ever seen. "No family, just me. But I wore my tie. Felt appropriate." Natalie made a decision. "Wait here." She went to the kitchen and came back with a slice of apple pie. The old man's favorite. She had noticed from a comment 2 weeks ago, with a single candle stuck in the middle. "Happy birthday to you," she sang quietly, not wanting to embarrass him, just wanting to mark the day as something other than ordinary. Make a wish. The old man stared at the candle, at the pie, at Natalie, and his eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to." "Make a wish!" He blew out the candle with a breath that took effort, that spoke of 87 years of breathing, and how each one was harder than the last. "What did you wish for?" Natalie asked. To be remembered," he said quietly. Silly wish for an old man. It's not silly." But he just smiled that sad smile and ate his pie slowly, savoring each bite, and when he paid, he left $15 for a $10.50 bill. $4.50 tip, the most he had ever left, the most he probably could afford. "It's my birthday," he said when Natalie tried to protest. "Let me be generous one day a year." Tuesday, November 5th. The old man seemed quieter, more withdrawn. Natalie brought his coffee and sat down across from him. A breach of diner protocol that Frank would probably yell about later, but she did not care. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just thinking about my brother, after you sang to me Saturday." "Your brother?" "Robert. We used to celebrate birthdays together, as children, before the fight." "What did you fight about?" The old man sighed, a sound like air escaping from something deflating. "Money, pride, stupid things that seemed important 42 years ago." "You could call him." "Too much time has passed. He wouldn't want to hear from me." Natalie thought of her mother, dead before all the important conversations could happen. All the "I love yous" and "I'm sorries" and "thank yous" lost to silence. "It's never too late." "Sometimes it is, dear. Sometimes pride builds walls too high to climb." "Don't wait too long," Natalie said, urgent now, needing him to understand. "Life's shorter than we think." The old man looked at her with those pale blue eyes and nodded slowly. But they both knew he would not call his brother. Some silences are too old to break. Thursday, November 7th. The old man looked frailer, thinner. His cough was worse. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold his coffee cup. Natalie knelt beside his booth, breaking every rule of professional distance. "William, have you seen a doctor about that cough?" He had never told her his name. She had gleaned it from his loyalty card sign-up, the one he never completed. William Morgan. But saying it now felt right, felt like the next step in whatever this relationship was. His eyes widened slightly. "You know my name. You know mine." Fair enough. He smiled, then coughed, a sound that rattled in his chest like coins in a tin can. It's nothing, Natalie. Don't worry about an old man. It's not nothing. You sound like my mother, like death approaching on soft feet. I'm fine, he insisted, but they both knew he was lying. Can I tell you something? William asked. Of course. You've been very kind to me these weeks. Kinder than anyone in a very long time. You're easy to be kind to. Most people don't see me. I'm furniture, background noise. Natalie felt her throat tighten. I know that feeling. Do you? Every day, invisible waitress serving invisible customers. William reached across the table and patted her hand, a gesture so gentle and fatherly that Natalie almost burst into tears. Then we're two invisible people who see each other. That's rare. Saturday, November 9th. William asked her about nursing school, about why she had dropped out, and Natalie found herself telling the whole story. Her mother's diagnosis, the impossible choice between education and care, the debt that remained after death, a financial scar where love used to be. You sacrificed your dream for your mother, William said. That's noble. It's what you do for family. Not everyone does, trust me. He was thinking of his brother Robert again, the wealthy brother he had not spoken to in 42 years, the brother who could have helped but pride had kept them apart. Do you regret it? William asked. Natalie thought about that, about her mother's last months, about holding her hand through the pain, about being there when it mattered. I regret that it didn't save her, but I don't regret trying. William nodded as if she had confirmed something important. Tuesday, November 12th. 3 days before the night that would change everything, William arrived with an envelope, manila and official-looking. He set it on the booth beside him. What's that? Natalie asked. Nothing, just paperwork. But the way he said it, careful and deliberate, suggested it was anything but nothing. Can I ask you a hypothetical question? William asked. Sure. If you had $100 and a stranger needed 87, but giving it meant you couldn't afford gas for the week, would you give it? Natalie laughed. That's oddly specific. Humor me. I don't know. Depends on the stranger, I guess. What if they were being humiliated? Publicly. Natalie's expression went serious. She had been humiliated publicly. At the pharmacy when her mother's prescription was denied. At the grocery store when her card was declined. At the bank when she tried to withdraw money that did not exist. She knew what humiliation felt like. The way it made you smaller. The way it erased you. Then yeah, she said. I'd give it. Humiliation's worse than hunger. William studied her face like he was memorizing it. You mean that? Yeah, I've been humiliated. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. You're a good person, Natalie Brooks. It was the first time he had used her last name. How did he know it? Had he looked at her name tag that carefully? Had he asked someone? I don't know about good, Natalie said. I'm just trying to survive. Goodness and survival aren't mutually exclusive. Thursday, November 14th. 1 day before everything changed. William wore the tie again, navy blue, pressed, formal. Another special occasion? In a way. What's the occasion? William looked out the window at the November gray, at the people passing by who did not see him, who had never seen him, a test of faith, of humanity, of... That sounds ominous. Perhaps. He turned back to her, and his pale blue eyes were calm, at peace. Natalie, I want to thank you. For what? Bringing you stale toast? For seeing me, for these weeks, for your kindness. You're welcome here anytime, you know that. I do, but tomorrow night I'm going to do something difficult. What? Test whether the world still has people like you in it. Natalie felt cold suddenly. I don't understand. You will. And Natalie? Yeah? Whatever happens, know that you've given an old man a reason to hope. After he left, Natalie stood at the window watching him walk down the street, shoulders straight despite the weight of 87 years, and she felt like she was watching someone say goodbye. Friday, November 15th. The day started like any other impossible day. Natalie worked the 11 to 8 shift, needing overtime because Riley's textbook money was due tomorrow, and the math still did not work. She had made $58 in tips by 6 p.m. and needed 22 more to hit her minimum. And the utility bill was still pink and highlighted and waiting on her kitchen counter like a patient executioner. Riley had texted twice asking about the money. Natalie had not answered. What could she say? I chose to pay for a stranger's toast instead of your education? I spent $300 on kindness I could not afford. The dinner rush started at 6. Harbor Light filled with Friday night energy, couples on dates and families celebrating small victories, and lonely people eating alone, because eating alone in public is somehow less lonely than eating alone at home. At 7:43, William walked in, 4 hours later than his usual time, wearing the tie, the pressed shirt, the polished shoes, looking like a man dressed for something important, looking like a man who had made a decision. He sat at table 6, and Natalie approached with her order pad and a smile that was no longer professional, but genuine, built over 3 weeks of coffee and crossword puzzles and conversations about Gatsby and hope. William, I didn't expect you tonight. I wanted to try dinner for once. Special occasion? You could say that. He opened the menu and studied it the way he had studied it that first day, carefully, calculating. But this time when he looked up, his eyes were clear, decided. I'm going to have the New York strip, medium rare, with Caesar salad and red potatoes. Natalie's heart stuttered. The New York strip was $42. With the salad and wine he ordered next, the Robert Mondavi Cabernet, the total would be close to $90. William had never spent more than $4.50. Great choice, she managed. I'll get that started. She brought him his wine, and he closed his eyes as he took the first sip, savoring it like a man who knows this is the last time, the last good wine, the last nice meal, the last moment of choosing something beautiful over something necessary. He ate slowly, deliberately, and Natalie checked on him more than necessary, some instinct telling her this meal mattered in ways she could not articulate. He looked peaceful. He looked ready. He looked like a man saying goodbye. When the meal was finished, William signaled for the check. Natalie printed it with shaking hands. $87.30. William pulled out his worn blue debit card, and Natalie brought the card reader and watched as he inserted it with trembling fingers. He entered his PIN. The machine beeped. Insufficient funds. The 2 words appeared on the screen, and the world stopped. William's face went from peaceful to pale to gray in 3 seconds. His hands began to shake violently. Oh, that can't be right. I just deposited my pension check this morning. Natalie's heart was breaking. She could see it happening, the humiliation spreading across his face like a stain. Around them, the diner had gone quiet. People were staring. Frank was walking over from the counter. Table 3, the businessman who never tipped, was smirking. Please, William whispered, his voice cracking. Can we try again? Natalie ran the card again, even though she knew it would not work. Insufficient funds. The machine beeped its judgment, and William was shrinking before her eyes. This dignified man who wore his tie on special occasions and polished his worn shoes and never asked for anything more than coffee and toast. I don't understand, he said, patting his pockets with desperate, fluttering hands. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Frank arrived at the table, impatient and oblivious. Brooks, what's the holdup? A customer from table 3 called out, Come on, pay or leave. William looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. This was his worst nightmare made real. Public humiliation. Visible failure. Proof that he was exactly as worthless as 42 years of invisibility had told him. Natalie felt rage build in her chest, hot and righteous. This kind, gentle man who had never hurt anyone, who had spent 3 weeks being courteous and thoughtful and tipping 50 cents from a budget that could not afford 50 cents. He did not deserve this. No one deserved this. She thought of her mother at the pharmacy. She thought of every time she had been made small by poverty. She thought of William's question 3 days ago. If you had $100 and a stranger needed 87, would you give it? Her bank account had $112.47. Her tips tonight totaled $58. After paying for William's meal, she would have $83.17 left. Not enough for Riley's textbooks. Not enough for gas. Not enough for anything except the knowledge that she had chosen kindness over survival, and would probably regret it for the rest of her life. But she could not watch this man suffer. It's handled, Frank, Natalie said, her voice sharp and clear. She pulled out her own wallet, the one with the cracked vinyl and Riley's photo inside, and she tapped her debit card on the reader before William could protest. Approved. Transaction complete. $87.30. New balance. $25.17. William stared at her, his pale blue eyes filling with tears. Miss, you can't. I can't let you. Natalie leaned close and whispered, It's a loyalty reward, William, for our best customer. Company policy. It was not company policy. It was financial suicide. It was the stupidest thing she had ever done. But watching William's face shift from humiliation to disbelief to profound gratitude, she could not bring herself to regret it. He stood slowly, adjusting his tie with shaking hands. "Natalie Brooks, you've just passed." "Passed what?" "Thank you for seeing me, for this." And then, in a voice that sounded like farewell, like a door closing on something irreversible, he said, "Goodbye, Natalie. You are the best of us." Not good night, goodbye. He walked out into the November dark, and Natalie stood frozen at table 6, her bank account decimated, her sister's textbook money gone, her own financial survival now impossible. She had just lit herself on fire to keep a stranger warm. Frank appeared at her elbow. "That $87 is coming out of your paycheck." "Fine." "Natalie, what were you thinking?" She was not thinking. That was the problem. Or maybe it was the solution. Maybe thinking was what made you cruel and blind and unable to see another person's humanity. Maybe thinking was the enemy of kindness. Elena found her in this bathroom 20 minutes later, splashing cold water on her face and trying not to cry. "Girl, what did you just do?" "I don't know." "That was Riley's textbook money." "I know." "You're going to be short on everything." "I know." Elena pulled her into a hug and they stood there in the bathroom of Harbor Light Diner, two women barely surviving, holding each other up because there was no one else to do it. "He said goodbye," Natalie whispered. "Not good night, goodbye." Maybe he was just being dramatic. But Natalie knew better. She had heard goodbye before. She had heard it in her mother's voice the last time she left the hospital. She knew what goodbye sounded like when someone meant it. She finished her shift in a fog, collected $94 total in tips, which minus $87.30 meant she had netted $6.70 for 6 hours of work. She drove home in her dying Corolla with the gas light on, climbed the stairs to her studio apartment, and stared at the pink highlighted bill on the counter. Her phone showed one text from Riley. "Nat? Money?" She did not answer. She could not answer. What was there to say? At 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, Natalie picked up her phone and Googled W. Morgan. Nothing useful came up. She tried William Morgan Boston, hundreds of results. She tried William Morgan Teacher. Still nothing that matched. She did not know his address, did not know his phone number, did not know anything about him except that he loved crossword puzzles and Fitzgerald, and had a brother named Robert he had not spoken to in 42 years. She did not know that William had gone home to his small apartment in the South End and sat at his kitchen table and written a final entry in a leather journal. She did not know that at 11:47 p.m., exactly 4 hours after she paid his bill, William Morgan's heart had stopped. She did not know that by morning, a lawyer in an expensive suit would be knocking on her door with an envelope that would destroy everything she thought she knew about kindness and consequence, and the price of being seen. All she knew was that she had spent $87.30 to save a stranger from humiliation, and she would spend the rest of her life wondering if it had been worth it. The answer, she would learn, was more complicated than she could possibly imagine. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of gray November light that makes everything look older than it is. Natalie woke on Elena's couch at 6:30, disoriented and aching, her body folded into a shape that furniture was never meant to hold. She had not gone home last night, could not face the pink highlighted bill, or the empty refrigerator, or the silence of a studio apartment that cost $1,200 a month and held nothing but evidence of her failure to keep her head above water. Her phone screen showed 17 missed calls, 3 from Riley, 2 from her landlord, 12 from numbers she did not recognize. She ignored them all and stared at the ceiling, counting the water stains like sheep, trying to calculate how many days she could survive on $25.17. The math was simple. She could not. Elena emerged from her bedroom at 7, already dressed, already moving with the purposeful energy of someone who had learned that stopping to think about your problems only made them heavier. She took one look at Natalie's face and disappeared into the kitchen. 5 minutes later, she returned with coffee and toast, both made from supplies she could not afford to share. "You need to eat," Elena said. Natalie sat up, her neck protesting. "I'm not hungry." That wasn't a suggestion. The coffee was instant Folgers, the same brand Natalie used because it was cheap and terrible, and it was what poor people drank when they wanted to pretend caffeine could solve problems that required money. She drank it anyway because Elena had made it, and refusing would be one more small cruelty in a world already overflowing with them. "Riley called me," Elena said, sitting in the armchair across from the couch. "She's worried." "I'll call her back." "When? After you figure out how to pay her tuition with thoughts and prayers?" Natalie flinched. Elena was not being cruel. She was being honest. Honesty hurt worse than cruelty because you could not dismiss it. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Natalie said quietly. "You're going to tell your sister the truth, that you spent her textbook money on a stranger and now she needs to find another way." "I can't do that to her." "You already did." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and true. Natalie had made a choice. Choices had consequences. Riley would pay the price for her sister's compassion the same way Natalie had paid the price for her mother's cancer. This was how generational poverty worked. You inherited debt and good intentions, and the certainty that no amount of kindness would ever be enough. At 9 a.m. exactly, someone knocked on Elena's door. The sound was wrong, too authoritative, too precise, the knock of someone who expected doors to open when they commanded. Natalie and Elena looked at each other, both understanding in that instant that whatever waited on the other side of that door was not a friend. "Stay here," Elena said, moving toward the door with the wariness of someone who had opened doors to police and process servers and men with eviction notices too many times before. She looked through this peephole and her entire body went rigid. "Natalie, you need to see this." Natalie joined her at the door and looked through the peephole at a man who did not belong in Elena's building. He wore a suit that cost more than Natalie made in 3 months, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, the kind of suit that announced wealth and power, and the absolute certainty that lesser people would move out of your way. He had silver hair and a face carved from granite, and he held a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. "Who is he?" Elena whispered. "I don't know, but I think I'm about to find out." Natalie opened the door, leaving the chain on, and studied the man through the gap. Up close, he looked even more out of place. A creature from a different ecosystem suddenly deposited in a hallway that smelled of cooking oil and old carpet. "Can I help you?" The man's eyes, the color of winter sky, scanned her face with clinical precision. "Are you Miss Natalie Brooks?" His voice was deep and clipped, each word enunciated with the careful precision of expensive education. Harvard Law, maybe. Yale. Somewhere that taught you to speak like your words were worth more than other people's. "Who's asking?" "My name is James Sterling. I'm an attorney with Sterling and Associates." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and held it through the gap. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, real. Natalie's blood turned to ice water. An attorney meant one thing. She was being sued. Harbor Light was suing her for the $87. Or Frank had reported her for theft. Or the Morgans, whoever they were, had somehow found out about William and were coming after her. "What is this about?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Sterling's expression remained neutral, professionally blank. "It concerns a transaction that took place last night at Harbor Light Diner." Of course it did. Of course her one act of kindness had legal consequences. Of course the universe had decided that helping an old man avoid humiliation was a crime worthy of litigation. "I can pay it back," Natalie said quickly. "It'll take time, but I can make payments. Please don't sue me. I'll sign whatever you want." Something flickered across Sterling's face. Confusion, maybe, or pity. "Miss Brooks, I'm not here to sue you. I'm here to inform you that Mr. William Morgan passed away last night." The world stopped. No, that was wrong. The world kept spinning, but Natalie stopped, frozen in the doorway with her hand on the chain and her heart forgetting how to beat. Passed away. 2 words that meant dead. William was dead. What? The word came out broken. Massive cardiac event, approximately 11:47 p.m. His building superintendent found him this morning. 11:47. Exactly 4 hours after Natalie had paid his bill. 4 hours after he had said goodbye instead of goodnight. 4 hours after he had walked out of Harbor Light Diner, looking peaceful and ready, and like a man who knew his time was finished. Natalie's legs stopped working. She grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. "Oh God, oh no!" Sterling waited, patient and unmoved, while Natalie's world collapsed. Elena appeared at her shoulder, steadying her, whispering something Natalie could not hear over the roaring in her ears. May I come in? Son, Sterling says. This is complicated. Natalie nodded, numb, and undid the chain. Sterling entered Elena's small apartment and stood in the center of the living room, his presence making the space feel even smaller. He did not sit. Men like Sterling did not sit in places like this. I'm very sorry for your loss, he said, and it sounded almost genuine. I understand you and Mr. Morgan had developed a relationship over the past few weeks. He was a regular at the diner. Natalie's voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. Just coffee and toast, $4.50. He was kind. He was. Why are you here? If you're not suing me, then why? Sterling set his briefcase on Elena's coffee table and opened it with practiced precision. I'm not William Morgan's attorney. He had no assets to speak of. I am, however, the executor of his brother's estate. Natalie's brain was moving too slowly, still stuck on the words passed away, unable to process new information. His brother? Mr. Robert Harrison Morgan, the financier? Perhaps you've heard of him? The name hit Natalie like cold water. Everyone in Boston had heard of Robert Morgan. Billionaire, recluse, the man who owned half the city's skyline and had died 2 months ago under mysterious circumstances that had dominated the news cycle for weeks. The man whose will had been contested by his children in a legal battle that made the front page of the Herald. The Robert Morgan? The same. He passed away in September. I don't understand. What does that have to do with me? Sterling pulled a cream-colored envelope from his briefcase. Thick, expensive paper, wax seal, the kind of envelope that held either wedding invitations or life-changing documents, and nothing in between. Mr. Robert Morgan's will was unconventional. He and his brother William were estranged for 42 years. 42 years. The same number William had mentioned. The fight over their mother's apartment. The pride that built walls too high to climb. Robert kept watch over William from a distance. Sterling continued. He knew William was struggling. He knew his pride would never allow him to accept help. And he knew his own children were circling him like vultures, waiting for him to die so they could liquidate his fortune. Sterling's voice carried a note of distaste when he mentioned the children. This was personal for him somehow. So he created a test. The word test made Natalie's stomach drop. William had used that word yesterday, the day before. A test of faith, of humanity. What kind of test? A test to determine if basic human decency still existed in the world. Robert liquidated his entire estate. $500 million. He placed it in a trust with one purpose, to help invisible people, the elderly poor, the forgotten, people like his brother. 500 million. Natalie could not comprehend numbers that large. It was abstract, meaningless. More money than existed in the real world where people worried about $87 restaurant bills. But the trust required a trigger, Sterling said. A key. Not a physical key, but a human one. Robert needed proof that someone would show William kindness without expectation of reward. The apartment was very quiet. Elena had stopped moving. Natalie had stopped breathing. William's bank account was programmed to decline any transaction over $50. Last night, when his card was declined at Harbor Light Diner, an alert was sent to my office. You, Miss Brooks, by paying his $87 bill, fulfilled the decency codicil. You passed Robert Morgan's test. The words made sense individually, but together they formed something impossible. A test. William's insufficient funds had been deliberate, planned. Robert Morgan had set up his own brother to be humiliated in public just to see if anyone would care. That's sick, Natalie whispered. That's grief, Sterling corrected. Robert spent 42 years watching his brother suffer because he was too proud to apologize. This was his way of making amends, of proving that the world William lived in was not as cruel as it seemed. By humiliating him? By giving someone the opportunity to show him kindness. You did. Sterling placed the envelope on the coffee table. Inside, you'll find a key and an address. What you do with them is entirely your decision. However, I strongly advise you to contact me before taking any action. Robert's children, Marcus and Victoria Morgan, were largely disinherited. They are currently contesting the will. They don't know about you yet, but they will. What do you mean they'll know about me? Sterling's expression hardened. They have investigators, resources. The moment probate processes the codicil, they'll find you, and they will not be pleased. Not. But I didn't do anything wrong, I just helped an old man. They'll see it differently. They'll see you as a threat to their inheritance, and they will do everything in their power to destroy you. The casual way he said destroy made it clear this was not hyperbole. This was a warning. Sterling handed Natalie his business card. Call me when you're ready, or don't. The choice is yours. But understand this. The moment you open that envelope, your life changes. There is no going back. He snapped his briefcase closed and walked to the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at Natalie with something that might have been respect. For what it's worth, Robert Morgan spent 30 years searching for someone like you, someone who would show kindness when it cost them something. He died believing humanity was irredeemable. You proved him wrong. He would have been grateful for that. Then he was gone, leaving Natalie and Elena alone with an envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. They sat in silence for 10 minutes. Outside, the city continued its Saturday morning routine. Cars passed, people walked dogs. Life went on, indifferent to the fact that Natalie's entire understanding of reality had just been demolished. Open it, Elena finally said. Natalie's hand shook as she broke the wax seal. Inside were 2 items, a brass skeleton key, old and ornate, with 4B engraved on the shaft, and a folded piece of parchment with an address typed in formal script. The Westminster Building, 1840 Commonwealth Avenue, apartment 4B. We have to go there, Elena said. What if it's a trap? Then we call the cops. But Nat, a lawyer doesn't hand you keys to nowhere. This means something. Natalie stared at the key, at the address, at the evidence that William Morgan had not been a lonely old man, but part of something larger and stranger than she could comprehend. He had known. When he asked her that hypothetical question about the $87, when he said she had passed, he had known she was being tested, and he had died knowing the test was complete. He went home and died alone, Natalie said, her voice breaking. 4 hours after I paid his bill, he died alone. Elena took her hand. But he died knowing someone cared. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing. Then let's make it something. Let's find out what he wanted you to see. 20 minutes later, they were in Elena's car driving toward Commonwealth Avenue, the brass key heavy in Natalie's pocket. The Westminster Building stood between modern condos like a monument to a different era, all dark brick and ornate cornices, and the kind of architectural dignity that new construction could never replicate. The lobby was dim and smelled of lemon polish and dust in time. A brass directory listed the tenants. Apartment 4B had a blank nameplate. They took the elevator, an old iron cage that groaned and shuddered with each floor. 4th floor, red carpet, faded floral pattern. Apartment 4B at the end of the hall. The door was dark wood, the nameplate missing, leaving only 2 small screw holes like empty eye sockets. Natalie's hand shook so badly she could not fit the key in the lock. Elena took it gently and slid it home. The lock turned with a heavy thunk, metal on metal, the sound of something opening that had been closed for a very long time. The door swung inward onto darkness. The smell hit them first. Stale air, closed rooms, the particular scent of a place where no one has breathed for decades. Elena found a light switch, and pale yellow light filled the apartment, illuminating a scene from another time. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, maybe 800 square feet, decorated in a style from the 1970s or early 80s. Furniture was covered in white sheets, ghost shapes in the gloom. Dust covered everything, thick and undisturbed. A rotary phone sat on a side table. Velvet drapes hung heavy at the windows. This was not a billionaire's penthouse. This was an ordinary person's home, frozen in amber. Why would Robert Morgan keep this place? Elena whispered. Natalie moved deeper into the apartment, her footsteps leaving tracks in the dust, the first marks anyone had made here in years. Photographs hung on the walls, their glass too dusty to see the images clearly. A small kitchen with 1950s appliances, a bathroom with original tile, a bedroom with a bed still made, the coverlet drawn tight like someone expected to return. But the desk in the living room was different. Everything else was covered in dust, but the mahogany desk against the far wall was clean, polished, maintained. On its surface sat 2 items, a leather-bound journal, brown and worn, and another cream-colored envelope, this one addressed in shaky cursive to the kind stranger. Natalie's breath caught. That was her. She was the kind stranger. She picked up the envelope with trembling hands and broke the seal. Inside was a letter, 3 pages of bold fountain pen handwriting, dated August 15th, 2 months before Robert Morgan's death, to the individual who finds this. If you are reading this, you have done something my own blood was incapable of. You have shown my brother William a moment of selfless decency, and in doing so, you have become the instrument of my final will and testament. My name is Robert Harrison Morgan. For 42 years, I have been estranged from my brother. We had a disagreement, a foolish, prideful argument that split our lives in two. It was November 1982. Our mother had just passed. She left this apartment, her apartment where we grew up, to both of us. William wanted to keep it as a memorial. I wanted to sell it and invest the money. I was already wealthy by then, building my fortune. William was a high school English teacher, barely making ends meet. I offered him $50,000 for his half. He refused. Not because he was greedy, but because he loved this place. Our mother died in that bedroom. He wanted to preserve her memory. I called him sentimental and foolish. He called me cold and mercenary. We said things brothers should never say. He walked out. I let him. Pride. Stupid, destructive pride. I bought the building to keep this apartment exactly as it was. I had it cleaned once a month, but never changed anything. I thought one day William would come back. He never did. For 42 years, I watched him from a distance. Private investigators, quarterly reports. I knew he retired from teaching in 2005. I knew his pension was $1,847 a month. I knew he lived alone in a studio in the South End. I knew he was struggling. I knew he was lonely. I knew my pride had destroyed him. Meanwhile, I built an empire and raised 2 children who are hollow, greedy shells obsessed with the Morgan name, but ignorant of its meaning. Marcus, my son, 42 years old, and has never held a job longer than 6 months. A gambling addiction he thinks I don't know about. He calls twice a year, Christmas, and when he needs money. Victoria, my daughter, married and divorced 3 times, runs a charity foundation that spends 87% on overhead, which is her lifestyle. They have waited my entire life for me to die, so they could squander my legacy on yachts and vanity. They will not get the chance. My formal will leaves each of them $1 as a token of all the love and respect they have shown me. The entirety of my estate, $500 million, has been liquidated and placed into a trust, the William and Robert Morgan Foundation for the Invisible. But a foundation needs leadership. It needs someone who understands what it means to be invisible, to struggle, to sacrifice. It needs someone who passes a test. I placed William in a position of minor financial distress. His account was programmed to decline any transaction over $50. The alert was linked to my attorney's office. You, Natalie Brooks, paid $87.30 you could not afford to spare my brother humiliation. You fulfilled the kindness codicil. This apartment was our mother's. It is where William and I grew up, where we were brothers before we were strangers. I kept it frozen as a reminder of my failure. You are now the sole executive director of the William and Robert Morgan Foundation. My attorney has the full documents. He will guide you. But do not be mistaken, this is not a gift. It is a burden. My children will come for you. They are sharks who have smelled blood. They will try to destroy you, discredit you, ruin you. Do not let them win. William died last night. I have arranged for this letter to be dated and delivered upon confirmation of his passing. I die soon and I am not at peace. But perhaps through you we can create something meaningful. Perhaps we can help people like William, the invisible ones, the forgotten ones, the dignified poor. Do not let them win. Sincerely, Robert Harrison Morgan. Natalie read the letter twice, then a third time, and with each reading the impossible became real. $500 million. A foundation. Executive director. William's death had not been random. Robert's test had not been hypothetical. Everything had been planned, orchestrated, designed to find one person in a city of millions who would choose kindness over survival. And she had passed without knowing she was being tested. This is insane, Elena breathed, reading over her shoulder. Nat, you're in charge of $500 million. I'm in charge of helping people. The distinction mattered. This was not wealth. This was responsibility. This was Robert Morgan's guilt transformed into purpose. His 42 years of regret turned into a mechanism for redemption. Natalie picked up William's journal, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. The first entry was dated January 1983. 42 years of William's life, documented in careful teacher's cursive. March 12, 1985. Saw Robert's name in the Globe today. His company went public. Worth $50 million now. I could call. I won't. Pride is a prison I built myself. November 3rd, 1997. Retired today. 32 years teaching English at Madison High. The kids threw me a party. I am 60 years old and utterly alone. Robert has grandchildren now. I saw their photos in the society pages. I will never meet them. December 25th, 2018. Christmas. Ate dinner at a diner. The waitress wished me happy holidays. Only person who spoke to me today. I am 81 years old and invisible. Natalie flipped forward, her heart breaking with each entry, watching William's life contract into loneliness and regret, year after year, until all that remained was the hope that someone might notice him. Then she found entries from the past month. October 22nd. A new diner today, different waitress, young, tired, kind eyes. She brought extra honey without me asking. Small kindness, but it mattered. November 9th. Asked the waitress Natalie if she would give $87 to save a stranger's dignity. She said yes without hesitation. She has been humiliated too. She understands invisibility. And finally, the last entry, dated November 14th, the day before his death. Tomorrow is the test. Robert's plan. My account will decline. I will be humiliated publicly. If no one helps, Robert was right. Humanity is dead. But if someone helps, if Natalie helps, then maybe there is hope. I am ready. After 87 years, I am ready to know. The next page was written in a shakier hand, added late at night, after the dinner, after Natalie had paid. She paid. This young woman, barely older than my students, paid $87 she could not afford. I saw it in her eyes. It hurt her to do it. She was counting on that money, and she did it anyway. She called it a loyalty reward to save me shame. She did not see a pathetic old man. She saw a person. After 42 years of invisibility, a stranger saw me. It felt like forgiveness. Robert's, God's, my own. Her name is Natalie Brooks. Tell her thank you. Tell her she is the best of us. Tell her I am sorry for what is coming. The test is complete. Humanity passed. I can die now. Finally at peace. Natalie closed the journal and pressed it to her chest, sobbing. William had known. He had walked into Harbor Light Diner knowing his card would decline, knowing he would be humiliated, hoping, desperately hoping, that someone would care enough to help. And she had, without knowing the stakes, without expecting reward. She had spent money she could not afford because watching another human being suffer was worse than her own poverty. Elena wrapped her arms around Natalie from behind. Both women stood in the dusty apartment, crying for a man they barely knew, and a billionaire who had died believing the world was cruel. And for 42 years of silence that could have been broken with a single phone call. The sound of a key in the lock shattered the moment. Not Natalie's key. A different key, scraping metal, trying to turn a lock that was blocked by Natalie's key, still in the mechanism. The handle jiggled violently, then stopped, then pounding, loud and furious, echoing through the apartment like gunshots. A male voice bellowed from the hallway. "Open this door, we know you're in there!" Natalie and Elena froze. "This is private property, you're trespassing." A female voice, sharp as cut glass, joined in. "We have a locksmith on the way, you have 30 seconds. Elena grabbed a brass lamp from a side table, holding it like a weapon. "Who the hell is that?" Natalie knew. She knew with absolute certainty. Robert's letter had warned her. They will come for you. The sharks who smelled blood. "Marcus and Victoria," Natalie whispered. "The children." She walked to the door and opened it, facing the two people who looked like they owned the world and were furious to discover a piece of it had been given away. Marcus Morgan was tall and handsome in a cruel, sharp way. Navy blazer, open collar, designer jeans, a Rolex that cost more than Natalie made in a year. Ice blue eyes like his father's, but colder. entitled, furious. Victoria Morgan Hartwell was impossibly thin, dressed in a black pantsuit with stiletto heels, blonde hair pulled into a severe ponytail, diamonds at her ears, contempt in her eyes. She looked at Natalie the way you look at insects. "Who?" Victoria said, her voice dripping venom. "The hell are you?" "I'm Natalie Brooks. I was invited here." Marcus laughed, a harsh bark. "Invited by whom? The ghost of our senile father?" "By James Sterling, your father's attorney." The name Sterling hit them like a slap. Both went rigid. Marcus's face reddened. Victoria's mask of control cracked for just a moment, revealing panic underneath. "Sterling." Victoria's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Why would our father's attorney give you anything?" Natalie held up the key. "He gave me this." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She recognized the key. "Where did you get that?" "I told you. Sterling delivered it to me yesterday." "That's our property," Marcus snarled, stepping forward. "Family heirloom. Give it to me." He reached for the key, but Elena stepped between them, still holding the lamp. "Touch her, and I call the cops." Marcus sneered. "Who are you, her bodyguard?" "I'm her friend, and you just threatened assault." Victoria took control, her voice shifting to silk over steel. "Let's try this civilly. You're a waitress, yes? I can tell by your hands." She was looking at Natalie's calloused palms, her short nails, her working hands that marked her as lesser, as someone who did not belong in apartments owned by Morgans. "You've stumbled into something you cannot possibly understand. This is a complex family matter, involving a contested $500 million estate." "I know what it is," Natalie said. "I read your father's letter." "What letter?" Marcus demanded. Natalie gestured to the desk. "The one he left for the kind stranger. The one explaining why he disinherited you." Silence. Deadly silence. Then Marcus lunged forward, grabbing Natalie's arm with fingers like steel. "Give me that letter. That is our property. Family documents." Pain shot up Natalie's arm. Elena swung the lamp, not hitting him, but close enough to make him let go. "Back off!" Elena shouted. Victoria stepped between them, ice cold now. "Enough, Marcus. We'll handle this legally." She turned to Natalie, invading her personal space, close enough that Natalie could smell expensive perfume and see the calculation in her eyes. "You preyed on our uncle, our poor sick Uncle William." "I helped him," Natalie said. "How convenient. One $87 dinner and you inherit $500 million. I didn't know who he was." "A likely story." "We had you investigated, Natalie Brooks. 26 years old, 42,000 in debt. Fired from Harbor Light Diner yesterday for theft." "What? I wasn't fired for a while." "Oh, you didn't know. Check your phone. Frank Patterson let you go. Bad publicity." Natalie's world tilted. Fired. She had been fired. Victoria pulled out a checkbook. Hermes leather, probably worth more than Natalie's monthly rent. She wrote a check with sharp, angry strokes and tore it free. $25,000. "Take it. Pay off your debts. Buy yourself some dignity. And forget this ever happened." The check lay between them, more money than Natalie had ever seen in one place. Enough to save Riley's semester. Enough to pay the pink-highlighted bill. Enough to breathe. But she looked at William's journal in her other hand. She thought of his last entry. "Tell her I am sorry for what is coming." William had known his niece and nephew would do this, had known they would try to buy her silence. And he had trusted her to say no. "No," Natalie said. Victoria's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "No, I'm not giving you anything. This apartment was left to me." "You're trespassing. Get out." Marcus's face went purple. "You stupid little, you have no idea what you just did." "This is your one chance," Victoria hissed. "Take the money and walk away or we will bury you. We have lawyers, money, power you cannot imagine." "Get out," Natalie repeated. Victoria's eyes went dead, all pretense of civility gone. "You will regret this, I promise you. By the time we're done, you won't be able to get a job washing dishes. We will destroy your life, your sister's life, your friends' lives. This is not a threat. This is a promise." She turned and walked out, heels clicking like gunshots. Marcus followed, pausing at the door to look back at Natalie with pure hatred. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The door slammed. Natalie and Elena stood alone in the dusty apartment, the $25,000 check on the floor, unclaimed. Elena's hands were shaking. Holy shit, Nat." Natalie's phone buzzed. A text from Riley. "Nat, please, I need that money. Professor just emailed. If I don't have books Monday, I'm dropped from the class." She stared at the text. Then at the check on the floor, $25,000 would solve everything. Riley's books, the rent, the debt, everything. But it would also mean William died for nothing. It would mean Robert's test had failed after all. It would mean 42 years of regret and loneliness had been meaningless. Natalie picked up her phone and called Sterling. "They found me," she said when he answered. "Marcus and Victoria." "I assumed they would." Sterling's voice was grim. "What did they offer?" "25,000. Did you take it?" "No." A pause, then quietly. "Good. That was the second test." "What?" "Robert's instructions. If you accepted any settlement offer, the foundation would dissolve. You would keep the money, but the trust would revert to Marcus and Victoria. Congratulations, Miss Brooks. You just passed test number 2. Natalie wanted to scream. More tests, more games, more impossible choices with consequences she could not predict. "They said they'll destroy me." "They will try. They've already filed motions to freeze the trust and remove you as executor. This is going to get ugly." "How ugly?" "They will systematically dismantle your life. Publicly, legally. They will make you wish you had never met William Morgan." Natalie looked at Elena, at William's journal, at the dusty apartment where 2 brothers had grown up before pride destroyed them. "Tell me what to do." "Fight," Sterling said simply. "Robert believed you were strong enough. Prove him right." After she hung up, Natalie stood at the window looking out at Commonwealth Avenue, at the city where hundreds of thousands of invisible people lived and died without anyone noticing. William had been invisible for 42 years. Robert had watched from a distance, too proud to apologize. And now Natalie held in her hands the power to make sure no one else suffered that particular loneliness. If she could survive what was coming. "We should go," Elena said softly. "Before they come back with that locksmith." Natalie picked up William's journal and Robert's letter and tucked them carefully into her bag. The brass key went into her pocket. As they walked toward the door, she paused and looked back at the apartment, at the shrine to a mother dead 40 years, at the evidence of love and loss and stupid, prideful choices that ruined lives. "I'm sorry," she whispered to William, to Robert, to the ghost that haunted this place. "I'm sorry you never fixed this, but I swear I'll make it mean something." The apartment did not answer. Dead places never do. But as Natalie locked the door behind her and pocketed the key, she felt the weight of $500 million and 42 years of regret settle onto her shoulders like a coat. She had passed 2 tests. She had no idea how many more were waiting. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Marcus and Victoria Morgan had just declared war on the wrong waitress, and she was done being invisible. The first attack came on Monday morning through the Boston Herald. Natalie saw the headline on her phone while sitting on Elena's couch at 6 a.m., unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to think about anything except the war she had just declared on people who owned armies. Morgan Hares accused mysterious waitress of elder fraud scheme. The article was 300 words of carefully crafted destruction. Victoria Morgan Hartwell had given an exclusive interview, her photograph positioned above the text like a queen addressing her subjects. She wore pearls and a sorrowful expression, the picture of a grieving daughter protecting her family's legacy from predators. "Our Uncle William was a gentle, trusting soul suffering from early dementia," Victoria was quoted as saying. "This woman befriended him, gained his confidence, and somehow convinced him to involve her in our father's estate. It's textbook elder abuse." Natalie read the words 3 times, each reading making her colder. Early dementia. William had been sharp as a tack, quoting Fitzgerald and solving crossword puzzles in pen. But the lie was perfect because William was dead and could not defend himself. The only witness to his mental competence was Natalie, and who would believe a waitress over a Morgan? The article continued, quoting Marcus next. "Our father's will is being contested on grounds of diminished capacity. This woman's sudden appearance only reinforces our belief that something deeply wrong occurred in his final months." They were building a narrative, confused old billionaire, scheming waitress, a fairy tale that made Natalie the villain and themselves the victims. The comment section below the article was already filling with judgment from strangers who knew nothing, except that poor people were always guilty, and rich people deserved their money. Elena emerged from her bedroom, took one look at Natalie's face, and grabbed the phone. She read in silence, her expression darkening with each line. When she finished, she set the phone down with deliberate care. the way you handle something that might explode. They're good, Elena said quietly. I'll give them that. They know exactly how to poison a well. By 9 a.m., the story had spread. Local news picked it up. Social media started churning. A hashtag emerged. Elder abuse. Victoria's Instagram post, carefully staged grief with a throwback photo of her and Robert, gathered 18,000 likes. The narrative was forming like ice, hard and cold and nearly impossible to break once set. Natalie's phone would not stop buzzing. Unknown numbers, reporters. Her voicemail filled with requests for comment, accusations, threats from strangers who believed they understood the situation based on 300 words and a rich woman's tears. At 10 a.m., Elena's phone rang. The number showed Harbor Light Diner. Elena answered, listened for 30 seconds, and her face went pale. She hung up without saying goodbye. Frank wants to see you now, he said to use the back entrance. They both knew what that meant. Harbor Light Diner looked the same as always. Same brick building, same dying neon sign, same smell of coffee and grease, and the dreams of people who could not afford better. Natalie entered through the kitchen, past the dishwasher who would not meet her eyes, past the line cooks who pretended to be busy. Frank was in his office, sitting behind a desk covered in papers and receipts, and the accumulated evidence of a man barely keeping his business alive. He did not stand when Natalie entered, did not smile, just gestured to the chair across from him with the weariness of someone who had already made a decision he hated. Sit. Natalie sat. Elena stood behind her, a silent guardian. I got 14 calls this morning, Frank said. Reporters, corporate, the health department, which I'm pretty sure was a threat disguised as a wellness check. He rubbed his face with both hands. Victoria Morgan Hartwell called personally, said if I kept you employed, she would make it her mission to destroy this diner. Frank, you know me. You know I didn't. It doesn't matter what I know. His voice was not angry, just tired, defeated. I have 23 employees. Most of them have kids. I can't risk their jobs to protect yours even if you're in the right. So you're firing me. Corporate already made the decision. They sent the paperwork an hour ago. Termination for cause. Creating a hostile work environment. Theft. Theft? I paid for William's meal with my own money. They claim you've been skimming from the register to fund your lifestyle. They have an anonymous tip. I know it's bullshit, but I can't fight corporate lawyers. Natalie felt the world tilting. Fired for cause meant no unemployment benefits. No references. No way to explain to future employers why Harbor Light had let her go without making herself sound guilty. Frank slid a check across the desk. $680. Her final paycheck, minus the $87.30 she had spent on William, which they were deducting as stolen funds. I'm sorry, Natalie, I really am. You were a good worker. But I have to think about everyone else. Elena's hand landed on Natalie's shoulder, squeezing hard enough to hurt, hard enough to remind her to breathe. Can I at least clean out my locker? Frank shook his head. Corporate said no. They'll mail your belongings. They want you off the property immediately. So this was how it ended. 3 years of work, of double shifts and aching feet and smiling through exhaustion, reduced to $680 and an escort out the back door like a criminal. Natalie stood, took the check, and walked out of Harbor Light Diner for the last time. On the sidewalk, reporters were waiting. Someone had tipped them off. Cameras swung toward her face. Questions came like punches. Miss Brooks, did you manipulate William Morgan? How much money did you get from him? What do you say to the Morgan family? Elena grabbed Natalie's arm and pulled her toward the car, shouldering through the crowd like a linebacker. They drove away with cameras still flashing, with strangers still shouting, with Natalie's entire professional life reduced to footage that would play on the evening news under headlines about greed and deception. That afternoon, a gray sedan appeared outside Elena's apartment building. Inside sat a man in a rumpled suit with a camera, a private investigator who made no attempt to hide his presence. He was there to intimidate, to remind Natalie that she was being watched. That privacy was a luxury she could no longer afford. Elena confronted him, walking right up to the driver's side window and knocking hard. Who hired you? The investigator smiled, said nothing, and took her photograph. Tuesday brought an eviction notice. Natalie's landlord, Mr. Chen, called personally, his voice tight with discomfort. Natalie, I'm sorry, I'm getting complaints from neighbors. They say you're involved in criminal activity. Reporters are bothering everyone. It's disruptive. Mr. Chen, I've lived there for 2 years. I've never been late on rent, never caused problems. I know, but I have other tenants to think about. I'm filing eviction. 30 days. The notice arrived by certified mail 2 hours later, official and final. One more piece of Natalie's life removed by people who had never met her, but believed what rich people told them to believe. Wednesday. Riley called crying. Nat, there are reporters at my dorm. They're asking my roommate about you. Someone slashed my bike tires. Natalie's heart stopped. What? In the bike rack. Someone cut them. Campus security says it's random vandalism, but Nat, it's not random. They're coming after me too. I'm so sorry, Riley. I never meant for this to... Just tell me the truth. Did you steal from that old man? The question landed like a knife. Riley, her baby sister, who she had raised and protected and sacrificed everything for, was asking if she was a thief. No, I helped him, that's all. I helped him, and now his family is trying to punish me for it. Riley was quiet for a long time. I believe you, but Nat, I'm scared. What if they do something worse? Come stay with me at Elena's, just for a few days until this calms down. Okay, I'll take the bus tomorrow. Thursday, the depositions began. Marcus and Victoria's legal team summoned Natalie to their offices on the 60th floor of a glass tower downtown, all marble and mahogany and the architectural embodiment of money as power. Sterling accompanied her, his presence the only thing keeping her from fleeing. Roger Harrison, the Morgan family attorney, was a silver-haired predator in a suit that cost more than Natalie's Corolla. He smiled like a man who had never lost a case and did not intend to start now. Miss Brooks, you're under oath. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Let's begin. How much debt are you currently carrying? About $42,000. Student loans? Yes. For a nursing degree you never completed. I had to drop out when my mother got sick. Harrison made a note. And you make how much per year as a waitress? Made. Past tense. I was fired yesterday. But I made about $26,000. So you're financially desperate, Sterling interrupted. Objection. Argumentative. Withdrawn. Let me rephrase. You're struggling financially, correct? Yes. Yet you paid $87 for a stranger's meal. Why? His card was declined. He was embarrassed. I wanted to help. You wanted to help. Or you wanted to ingratiate yourself to a man you suspected had money. I didn't know who he was. Harrison leaned forward, his smile sharpening. You expect this court to believe that you, a woman drowning in debt, gave away nearly a day's wages out of pure altruism, with no expectation of reward. Yes? How noble. And yet 24 hours later, you're named executor of a $500 million foundation. Quite a return on investment. The deposition continued for 3 hours. Harrison asked the same questions in different ways, trying to trap Natalie in contradictions, painting her as a calculating predator who had identified a mark and executed a con. By the time Sterling ended the session, Natalie felt flayed, every vulnerability exposed and cataloged for future use. In the parking garage, Sterling turned to her with unusual gentleness. Sis, you did well. Don't let him shake you. He made me sound like a criminal. That's his job. Our job is to prove otherwise. Robert's video will help. Trust the process. But trusting the process was hard when the process felt designed to crush you. Friday evening, Natalie's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer, exhausted by reporters and threats and strangers who felt entitled to her attention. But something made her pick up. Miss Brooks? A man's voice, smooth and familiar. Marcus Morgan. How did you get this number? I get any number I want. That's what resources buy. I'd like to meet, face to face, off the record. Why would I do that? Because I'm offering you a way out of this nightmare. 1 hour. Public place. Starbucks on Newberry Street. 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone and I'll make this all go away. He hung up before she could refuse. Elena, overhearing, shook her head violently. Don't go, it's a trap. What if it's a real offer? Then he can email it to Sterling. You don't meet with sharks. But Natalie was drowning. Riley was scared. Elena was burning through her savings. The pink bill was still unpaid, now joined by other pink bills, a growing pile of final notices that formed a paper mountain of failure. Maybe Marcus had a number large enough to make the pain stop. Sterling, when she called, was cautious. If you go, record everything. Your phone, voice memo app. Massachusetts is one-party consent. He won't know you're recording. At 8 p.m., Natalie sat across from Marcus Morgan in a Starbucks that smelled like burnt espresso and desperation. He had chosen a corner table away from the crowd, and he looked relaxed in expensive casual wear, a man who had never doubted his right to take up space. 2 lattes sat on the table, already ordered. He gestured to one. Caramel macchiato. I had my assistant guess your taste. Natalie did not touch it. What do you want, To end this. You want to end this. We have a common goal. You could have called Sterling. I wanted to speak human to human, not lawyer to lawyer. He leaned back, studying her. Look, I'm not a monster. I'm a guy watching his inheritance disappear to a stranger. From my perspective, you're stealing what my father built. I'm not stealing anything. Your father gave it away. My father was dying, morphine, lung cancer, not thinking clearly. Sterling has a video of him, perfectly lucid. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. We'll contest that video. Argue coercion, diminished capacity, whatever it takes. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Inside, a check. Natalie's heart stopped when she saw the number. $1 million. $1 million, tax-free. In your account by Monday. You sign an NDA, relinquish the executorship, hand over William's journal and Robert's letter. You disappear. New city, new life. Go back to nursing school, live well. And you get $500 million. And we drop all litigation. No more depositions, no more investigators, no more reporters. Your life goes back to normal. Natalie stared at the check, her mind doing math. $1 million could change everything. Riley's full college tuition, Elena's mother's medical care for life, a house, security, freedom, everything she had never had and never would have unless she took this money. But William's face appeared in her memory, his gentle voice. Tell her I am sorry for what is coming. He had known they would do this, had known they would try to buy her silence. What's the catch? Natalie asked. No catch. You sign papers saying you have no claim to the Morgan estate. We go our separate ways. And the foundation? Dissolves. The money reverts to the heirs, my sister and me. So that was it. Take the $1 million, betray William's trust. Let 42 years of regret and Robert's careful planning dissolve into nothing so Marcus could gamble it away, and Victoria could buy another yacht. Natalie picked up the check, held it, felt the weight of 7 digits and the cost of her soul. I need to think about it, she said. Marcus smiled, believing he had won. Take 24 hours. But Natalie, understand this. Fight us and you have a 30% chance of winning, 70% chance you lose everything and end up bankrupt and broken. Take this and you have 100% certainty of walking away whole. It's not even a choice. Natalie stood, the check still in her hand, and walked out of the Starbucks without another word. On the sidewalk, Elena was waiting in the car, engine running. Well? Natalie showed her the check. Elena's eyes went wide. $1 million. He wants me to walk away, let the foundation dissolve. What are you going to do? Natalie stared at the check, at the number that could save everyone she loved. And she thought about William eating his last meal alone, about Robert spending 30 years searching for someone who would prove humanity was not dead, about invisible people everywhere who needed someone to fight for them. She tore the check in half. Elena gasped. What are you doing? Natalie tore it again, and again. Pieces of paper worth $1 million floating to the ground like snow. I'm saying no. Natalie, are you insane? That was $1 million. It was blood money, conscience money. I'm not for sale. She got in the car and they drove in silence back to Elena's apartment, where Riley was waiting, worried and young and needing her sister to be someone worth believing in. 1 week later, Victoria made her move. Saturday evening, a knock on Elena's door. Natalie answered to find Victoria Morgan Hartwell standing in the hallway, alone, dressed down in expensive casual, her usual armor of diamonds and severity replaced by something that almost looked human. May I come in, Mami? Natalie should have said no, should have called Sterling, but curiosity won. She let Victoria enter, watching as the woman who had threatened to destroy her looked around Elena's small apartment with something that might have been nostalgia. My first apartment was smaller than this, Victoria said quietly, before my father made his fortune, before the money changed everything. She sat without being invited and pulled out her phone, showing Natalie a photograph, a young girl, maybe 8, on a beach with an older man. Both were laughing, genuine joy captured in a moment before time complicated everything. That's the last time I remember my father being happy, Victoria said. I was 8. After that, he was always working, always building, always disappointed in everything we did. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand, I'm not a monster. I'm a daughter who was never good enough for a man who valued money over family. Natalie felt something unexpected: pity. This woman who had threatened her, who had deployed lawyers and investigators in media campaigns, was also a victim of Robert Morgan's emotional absence. But pity was not the same as trust. What do you want, Victoria? Victoria set her phone down and looked at Natalie with eyes that were calculating even when they pretended to be vulnerable. I want to make peace. Marcus is hot-headed. His offer was crude. I'm here with a better one. She pulled out a checkbook and wrote a new check. $2 million. Double what Marcus offered. Plus, we drop all personal litigation against you. You can even keep the executorship if you want. Run the foundation, help people. We just want seats on the board. Control of investments. The family name attached to our father's legacy. So you get to turn it into a tax shelter. Victoria's mask slipped for a moment, ice showing through the warmth. What if we do? It still helps people. You still get to feel good about yourself. Everyone wins. Except your father wanted it independent, free from your influence. My father is dead. His wants are irrelevant. There it was. The truth underneath the performance. Robert was dead and therefore powerless. The living could reshape his legacy however they wanted. History belonged to whoever controlled the narrative. Here's reality, Victoria continued, her voice hardening. We will win. Maybe not this year, but we have infinite resources and infinite patience. How long can you fight? 6 months? A year? We can fight for a decade. You'll be destroyed long before then. Natalie looked at the $2 million check, at numbers that could solve every problem in her life and create new ones she could not imagine. She thought about Elena's mother running out of medication, about Riley's tuition due in 3 weeks, about the eviction notice counting down toward homelessness. You could win too, Natalie said quietly. Victoria's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? Help someone. Expect nothing back. See someone invisible. It's never too late to be the daughter your father wished for. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or pain. For a moment, Natalie saw the 8-year-old girl on the beach, laughing with her father before money poisoned everything. Then the moment passed, and Victoria was steel again. It's too late for me, but not for you. Take the money, Natalie. Save yourself. No. Victoria nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer but needed to hear it anyway. Then we'll see you in court. And Natalie, I meant what I said. We will destroy you. After she left, Elena emerged from the bedroom where she had been hiding, her face pale. Please tell me you didn't just turn down $2 million. I did. Why? Nat, my mom needs her medication. I'm $1,400 short on rent. Riley's tuition is due. That money could save all of us. And it would mean William died for nothing. Elena started crying, the kind of exhausted tears that come when you have been strong for too long. My mom asked me yesterday if we should look at hospice care. Hospice, Natalie. She's 54 years old, and she's talking about dying because I can't afford $800 a month for pills that keep her alive. The words hit Natalie like bullets. Elena's mother, a warm woman who made the best pernil Natalie had ever tasted, who laughed at bad jokes and called everyone Mija, was talking about dying because her daughter could not afford medicine. When the foundation activates, Natalie said, her voice shaking, the first thing we do is cover your mom's medical care for life. I promise you, Elena. I promise. If you win, that's a big if. If. I'll win. I have to. Elena wiped her eyes and looked at Natalie with something between admiration and anger. You're either the bravest person I know or the stupidest. Maybe both. That night, Natalie could not sleep. She lay on Elena's couch, staring at the ceiling, doing the math over and over. Riley's textbooks, Elena's rent, her own eviction, the medical bills, the student loans, the pink-highlighted utility bill that had started this whole impossible journey. She had turned down $3 million total. $3 million. That was 114 years of her waitress salary. That was Riley's college and Elena's mom's medicine, and a house and a car and security for everyone she loved. She had turned down salvation because of pride, or principle, or stupidity. She did not know anymore. Wednesday brought a new attack. An email arrived, anonymous, with a subject line that made Natalie's stomach drop. Information about William Morgan. The email claimed to be from William's neighbor, someone with letters that could help Natalie's case. The meeting place was Boston Common, Frog Pond, 5 p.m. Come alone. Natalie showed Sterling. It's obviously a trap. What if it's real evidence? Then they can mail it to my office. You don't go, Natalie. This is how they'll photograph you in a secret meeting and claim witness tampering. But Natalie was desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. She went anyway, Elena insisting on coming despite the instruction to come alone. At 5 p.m., they stood near the frog pond while an older woman in a red scarf approached, looking trustworthy and grandmotherly and completely fake. Natalie Brooks? Yes, I have letters from William. The woman held up a manila envelope. As Natalie reached for it, photographers exploded from behind trees. Cameras flashed. A reporter materialized shouting questions. The woman held up cash, obviously planted props, and declared loudly enough for the cameras to hear, "She just offered me $500 for these letters. I have it on video." Elena grabbed Natalie and pulled her away, both women running through Boston Common, while cameras chased and strangers stared and tomorrow's headlines wrote themselves. Morgan Waitress caught trying to buy evidence. Fraud suspect meets mystery woman in secret. The photos would show Natalie reaching for an envelope, looking guilty, looking exactly like what Victoria wanted her to look like. That night, Sterling called with grim news. They're filing new motions. Witness tampering, fraud. They're building a criminal case on top of the civil one. What do I do? We deploy Robert's weapon, the video deposition. We file it with the court tomorrow. Force them to respond. It's time to go on offense. Natalie hung up and looked at Riley, who was sitting on the couch doing homework, trying to pretend her life was normal. At Elena, who was calculating rent money she did not have. At her own reflection in the dark window, a woman who looked 10 years older than 26. She had lost her job, her apartment, her reputation, her peace of mind. She had turned down $3 million and gained nothing but the certainty that tomorrow would bring fresh attacks from people who viewed her destruction as a hobby. But she still had William's journal, Robert's letter, the brass key to apartment 4B, the proof that two brothers had loved each other and lost each other, and spent 42 years regretting it. And she had one weapon left, a video of a dying billionaire telling his children exactly what he thought of them. Sterling had said it would end this, that Robert's video was unassailable, that it would force Marcus and Victoria to accept defeat. Natalie hoped he was right, because she had nothing left to lose except the fight itself. And losing was not an option. Not when William had died believing she was strong enough to win. Not when invisible people everywhere needed someone to prove that kindness was not weakness and compassion was not currency. Marcus and Victoria Morgan had declared war on a waitress. They had money and power and lawyers and decades of practice using both. But Natalie had something they did not. She had been invisible her whole life. She knew how to survive in the shadows. She knew how to fight when the world insisted she was already beaten. And she was done being anyone's victim. The war was far from over. But tomorrow, Robert Morgan would speak from beyond the grave. And when he did, the whole city would hear what a father really thought about children who valued money over humanity. Natalie picked up her phone and called Sterling. "File the video," she said. "Let's end this." Sterling was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. They'll escalate." "Let them. I'm not running anymore." "Good, because Robert believed you were a fighter. Time to prove him right." Natalie hung up and looked at Elena and Riley, the two people she loved most in the world, both of whom were suffering because of her choices. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I got you into this. I'm sorry I chose strangers over the people I love. But I promise you, when this is over, we're going to help so many people that William and Robert's 42 years of silence will mean something. We're going to make invisible people visible, starting with us." Riley looked up from her homework. "You really think you can win?" "I have to. Because the alternative is letting rich people decide who deserves dignity. And I'm done with that." Elena crossed the room and pulled Natalie into a hug, Riley joining them. Three women barely surviving in a city that did not care whether they lived or died. But they cared about each other. And sometimes that was enough. Outside, the private investigator's gray sedan was still parked on the street, its occupant watching and waiting and photographing their every move. Let him watch, Natalie thought. Let him tell Marcus and Victoria that the waitress is not backing down. Let them know that tomorrow, their father's voice will echo in a courtroom, and the whole world will hear a billionaire call his own children hollow and greedy and unworthy. The war was about to enter its final phase, and Natalie Brooks, unemployed, homeless, and drowning in debt, was ready for battle, because she had already lost everything except the fight itself. And that made her dangerous in ways Marcus and Victoria could not comprehend. You cannot threaten someone with poverty when they are already poor. You cannot take away dignity from someone who has been invisible their whole life. All you can do is give them a reason to fight. And William Morgan, in his last journal entry, in his final gift of trust, had given Natalie exactly that. The test was not over, it was just beginning, and Natalie intended to pass. Suffolk County Superior Court occupied a granite building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Classical columns, marble steps worn smooth by a century of footsteps. Inside, the hallways smelled of floor wax and old paper and the accumulated weight of human judgment. Natalie stood on those marble steps at 8:45 on a Friday morning, watching her breath fog in the November air, watching reporters gather like crows, sensing carry-on. Sterling stood beside her, impeccable in charcoal gray, his briefcase containing 2 weapons, William's journal, and a thumb drive with Robert Morgan's video deposition, 2 hours of a dying billionaire speaking truth from beyond the grave. "Remember," Sterling said quietly, "Harrison will try to provoke you. Don't let him. Stay calm. Tell the truth. Let Robert do the heavy lifting." Natalie nodded, unable to speak. Her borrowed blazer, Elena's again, felt like costume armor. Her shoes were Target clearance, scuffed and obviously cheap next to the Italian leather that would fill the courtroom. She looked like what she was, a waitress playing dress-up in a world that belonged to people who measured worth in dollars and pedigree. Elena and Riley waited at the bottom of the steps, both having taken the day off from jobs they could not afford to miss. They would sit in the gallery as Natalie's only supporters, in a room that would be filled with Morgan allies, society friends, people who believed wealthy families deserved their money simply because they had always had it. "You ready?" Sterling aside. Natalie thought of William's last journal entry. "Tell her she is the best of us." She thought of Robert's letter. "Do not let them win." She thought of $3 million in bribes she had refused, and a life that had been systematically destroyed by people who viewed her as an obstacle to inheritance. "Let's go." The courtroom was everything Natalie expected. Wood paneling dark as old blood, high ceilings that made voices echo, fluorescent lights that cast everyone in the unflattering pallor of institutional judgment. Judge Margaret Price sat elevated behind the bench, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and the expression of someone who had presided over too many fights between rich people who should have known better. The gallery was packed, media in the back rows, sketching because cameras were not allowed, society watchers in the middle, hungry for drama, and in the front row on the plaintiff's side, Marcus and Victoria Morgan, dressed like they were attending a funeral for dignity itself. Marcus in a navy suit that probably cost $5,000. Victoria in black Chanel, pearls at her throat, every inch the grieving daughter protecting her father's legacy from predators. They looked at Natalie with identical expressions of contempt. She was the help, the interloper, the waitress who had forgotten her place. Natalie took her seat at the defense table, Sterling beside her, and tried to remember how to breathe. Judge Price called the court to order. "We are here on the matter of Morgan v. Brooks, specifically to hear arguments on the admission of posthumous video testimony from the decedent, Robert Harrison Morgan, and on the broader question of testamentary validity. Mr. Harrison, you may proceed." Roger Harrison rose like a man who owned the room because he had won in rooms like this 100 times before. He was expensive confidence in a suit, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who expected to be believed simply because he had never been told no. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs object strenuously to the admission of this video testimony. This recording was made in secret, without opposing counsel present, without opportunity for cross-examination. It is self-serving hearsay from a man who was demonstrably under duress from terminal illness and pain medication." He gestured to a thick folder. "We have medical records showing Robert Morgan was on morphine at the time of recording. We have expert testimony that lung cancer in its final stages affects cognitive function. This video is not reliable evidence. It is the desperate act of a dying man being manipulated by his attorney." Harrison turned to face Natalie, his gesture theatrical and damning. "More troubling is the defendant herself. Miss Brooks, a woman with over $40,000 in debt, suddenly befriends an elderly man and within weeks becomes executor of his brother's $500 million estate. Your Honor, this is not charity. This is a sophisticated con. He pulled out blown-up photographs, security camera footage from Harbor Light Diner showing Natalie serving William. We have evidence that Miss Brooks researched the Morgan family, that she identified William as a target, that she cultivated a relationship over 3 weeks with the specific intention of manipulating him into involving her in the estate. Sterling started to rise, but Judge Price waved him down. Save your objection, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Harrison, do you have evidence of research or just speculation? Harrison's smile tightened. We have her internet search history, obtained legally through subpoena. She Googled Robert Morgan the day after William died. After being told by Mr. Sterling that she was involved in Robert Morgan's estate, Sterling called out. After receiving information about a man she had never heard of. That's called due diligence, not manipulation. Gentlemen, Judge Price said sharply. Mr. Harrison, continue your argument without the theatrics. Harrison composed himself. Your Honor, the video should be excluded as unreliable, prejudicial, and hearsay. But more importantly, this entire case reeks of undue influence. A young woman with significant financial motivation befriends a vulnerable elderly man and somehow, miraculously, ends up controlling his brother's fortune. The law exists to prevent exactly this kind of exploitation. He sat down, satisfied, and Natalie felt the weight of his words settling over the courtroom like fog. He had painted her as a predator, a schemer, a gold digger who had executed a perfect con. Sterling stood slowly, deliberately, letting the silence build. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. Your Honor, Mr. Harrison has constructed an elaborate fiction. Let me offer you fact. Robert Morgan was not on morphine when he recorded his video deposition. He was lucid, competent, and determined. We have medical testimony from Dr. Patricia Chen, the neurologist present at the recording, confirming he scored 30 out of 30 on cognitive assessment. Sterling placed a document on the clerk's desk. Dr. Chen's report dated August 30th, 2 weeks before Robert's death. Quote, Mr. Morgan demonstrates no signs of dementia, diminished capacity, or cognitive impairment. He is of sound mind and clear purpose. He turned to face this gallery, addressing the room. As for Miss Brooks, let me be clear about the timeline. She paid $87 for William Morgan's meal on November 15th. She had no idea who William was beyond a regular customer. She had no idea Robert Morgan existed. She had no idea any test was being conducted. Sterling's voice hardened. The insufficient funds on William's card was not an accident. It was programmed by Robert Morgan himself, before his death, as a deliberate test. William's account was set to decline any transaction over $50. An alert was sent to my office when Natalie Brooks paid his bill. She passed a test she did not know existed. That is not manipulation. That is the entire mechanism of the test functioning exactly as designed. Judge Price leaned forward. Mr. Sterling, you're saying Robert Morgan deliberately set up his brother to be humiliated? I'm saying Robert Morgan spent 42 years regretting his estrangement from William. This was his way of proving that human decency still existed. That somewhere in a city of millions, one person would show his brother kindness without expecting reward. Sterling gestured to Natalie. Miss Brooks did exactly that. She spent money she desperately needed because watching another human being suffer was worse than her own poverty. She did not expect compensation. She did not expect anything except to spare an old man humiliation. He pulled the thumb drive from his briefcase and held it up. This video contains Robert Morgan's own words, his explanation of the test, his reasoning for the foundation, his direct rebuttal to any claim of diminished capacity, and most importantly, his assessment of his own children and why he chose to disinherit them. Harrison shot to his feet. Objection! The video is inflammatory and prejudicial. It is Robert Morgan's sworn testimony, Sterling countered, made under oath, witnessed by medical professionals, notarized, and legally binding. Massachusetts law explicitly permits testamentary video depositions. Your Honor, the man who created this will has the right to explain his reasoning. The plaintiffs want to silence him because they know what he'll say. Judge Price considered for a long moment, her eyes moving between Harrison's controlled fury and Sterling's calm certainty. Finally, she spoke. The video will be admitted. Mr. Morgan was the testator. He has the right to explain his wishes. We'll view it now. Bailiff, dim the lights. The courtroom went dark except for the screen that descended from the ceiling. Marcus muttered something to Victoria. She placed a hand on his arm, silencing him, her face a mask of composure that did not quite hide the panic underneath. The screen flickered to life, and Robert Morgan's face filled the frame. He looked like a man who had made peace with death. Gaunt from cancer, skin stretched tight over sharp bones, but his eyes were clear and bright and blazing with purpose. He sat in what appeared to be Sterling's office, medical equipment visible in the background, Dr. Chen standing beside him in a white coat. Robert's voice when he spoke was weak but unwavering. "My name is Robert Harrison Morgan. Today is August 30th, 2024. I am 85 years old, I am dying of lung cancer, and I am of completely sound mind." He recited his birth date, his social security number, the names of his companies, detailed financial information that proved cognitive function. Dr. Chen stepped forward and confirmed his mental competency for the record, showing test results, medical documentation, proof that this was not a confused old man, but someone making deliberate choices. Then Robert's tone changed, became harder, angrier. "I am creating this video because I know my children, Marcus and Victoria Morgan. I know they will contest my will. I know they will claim I was senile, manipulated, coerced. Let me address that directly. I was none of those things. I am crystal clear about what I'm doing and why." He leaned toward the camera, his gaze intense. "For 42 years, I have been estranged from my brother William. We had a fight in 1982 over our mother's apartment. I wanted to sell it and invest the money. William wanted to keep it as a memorial. I called him sentimental and foolish. He called me heartless and greedy. We were both right. We were both too proud to apologize." Robert's face softened with regret. "I bought the building to preserve that apartment exactly as our mother left it. I thought William would come back. He never did. For 42 years, I watched him from a distance. Private investigators, quarterly reports. I knew he was struggling. I knew he was lonely. I knew he ate at diners because eating alone in public was better than eating alone at home." His voice broke slightly. "I could have helped him. I could have reached out. Pride stopped me. Stupid, destructive pride. William died last night believing I never cared. That is my greatest failure." The courtroom was utterly silent. Even Marcus had stopped fidgeting. "Now, to my children." Robert's voice went cold. "Marcus, Victoria, you are watching this because you are contesting the will. You are claiming I was incompetent. Let me prove otherwise by listing your crimes against this family." He pulled out documents, holding them up to the camera. "Marcus, 2019, you embezzled $75,000 from Morgan Industries. I covered it up to protect the family name. 2021, gambling debts in Macau totaling $450,000. I paid them to keep you out of trouble. 2023, DUI arrest. I spent $50,000 on lawyers to make it disappear." Marcus's face had gone purple. Victoria's hand tightened on his arm, a warning to stay silent. "Victoria." Robert's tone became even more scathing. 2018, your charity foundation. 87% of donations went to quote overhead, which was your lifestyle. Mercedes, country club, personal shopping. I have the tax records. 2020, you and Marcus discussed having me declared incompetent so you could liquidate my assets. I have recordings of that conversation. He played audio. Marcus's voice tinny but clear. "Dad's losing it. We need to move fast before he gives everything away." Victoria's response. "I already talked to that psychiatrist. He'll testify to diminished capacity if we pay him enough." The recording clicked off. Robert looked into the camera with profound sadness. "These are my children, hollow, greedy, and utterly lacking in the values I tried to instill. They have waited my entire life for me to die, so they could waste everything I built. They will not get the chance." He straightened, his voice gaining strength. "My formal will leaves Marcus and Victoria $1 each. The entirety of my estate, $500 million, has been placed in trust. The William and Robert Morgan Foundation for the Invisible. Its purpose is to help people like my brother, the elderly poor, the forgotten, the dignified people suffering in silence." Robert's face filled with something like hope. "But a foundation needs leadership. It needs someone who understands what it means to be invisible. someone who would sacrifice their own welfare to protect another person's dignity. So I created a test. He explained the mechanism: William's account programmed to decline, the alert system, the careful monitoring. I needed to know if human decency still existed, if one person in the city would help my brother without expecting reward, if someone would pass a test they didn't know they were taking. The screen cut to footage: security camera from Harbor Light Diner. Grainy but clear. William's card being declined. Natalie's face as she watched him shrink with humiliation. Her reaching for her own wallet. The transaction. Her gentle lie about it being a loyalty reward. That woman, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion, is Natalie Brooks, a waitress making $26,000 a year. She paid $87 she could not afford because watching my brother suffer was worse than her own poverty. She asked for nothing, expected nothing. She simply saw a human being who needed help. Robert's eyes filled with tears. She passed the test. She proved me wrong about humanity. And because of that, she is now the executive director of the foundation. Not as a reward, but as a responsibility. She will help thousands of people like William, like herself, like everyone my children have spent their lives ignoring. He looked directly at the camera, directly at his children. Marcus, Victoria, you are entitled to nothing you did not earn. You have earned my disappointment. You have earned $1 each. I hope someday you understand why. Then he looked past the camera, as if speaking to Natalie herself. To the woman who helped my brother, thank you. You gave an old man dignity in his final hours. You proved that kindness is not dead. Use this foundation well. Help the invisible ones. Do not let my children win. The screen went black. The lights came up slowly. The courtroom remained silent, stunned. Natalie saw tears on Elena's face, saw Riley staring at the blank screen in shock, saw strangers in the gallery looking at Marcus and Victoria with new understanding. Marcus was shaking with rage. Victoria sat frozen, her mask of composure completely shattered, her face pale and her hands trembling. Sterling stood. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. Robert Morgan's investigators documented his children's behavior for 5 years. 600 pages of bank records, emails, recordings, and photographic evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and attempted manipulation. He dropped a massive binder on the clerk's desk with a thud that echoed through the courtroom. Everything Robert mentioned in his video is documented here. This is not speculation. This is proof. Judge Price looked at the binder, then at Marcus and Victoria, then at Harrison, whose expensive confidence had evaporated. Mr. Harrison, do you wish to respond? Harrison stood, clearly scrambling. Your Honor, this video is clearly designed to inflame. These allegations against my clients are unproven and they're documented in 600 pages. Judge Price interrupted. Are you claiming the documentation is fraudulent? I'm claiming it's one-sided and prejudicial. It's evidence from the man whose will you're contesting, the man you claim was incompetent. Judge Price's voice was hard now. Mr. Harrison, that video shows a man who is lucid, articulate, and very clearly aware of his children's behavior. The medical evidence supports competency. The timeline supports Miss Brooks' innocence. What exactly is your case? Harrison hesitated, then played his last card. We call Natalie Brooks to the stand. Sterling nodded to Natalie. This was expected, planned. She stood on shaking legs and walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and sat in the chair that felt like a spotlight. Harrison approached with the smile of a predator who had found wounded prey. Miss Brooks, you're drowning in debt, correct? I have student loans, yes. $42,000 worth. Yes. And you make minimum wage as a waitress. Maid, I was fired. Because of this case. Sterling objected. Relevance. I'm establishing motive, Harrison said. Judge Price allowed it. Harrison continued. You paid $87 for William Morgan's meal. Why? His card was declined. He was embarrassed. I wanted to help. You wanted to help a stranger by giving him money you desperately needed. Yes, that seems unlikely. Isn't it more probable that you saw an opportunity? An old man in expensive clothes, probably wealthy, and you invested $87 hoping for a return? Natalie felt anger rising but remembered Sterling's advice. Stay calm. Tell the truth. No, that's not what happened. Then explain to this court why someone in your financial position would make such an irrational choice. Natalie looked at William's journal sitting on the defense table, at Elena in the gallery, at Judge Price waiting for an answer. Because I've been humiliated, Natalie said quietly. I know what it feels like when your car gets declined and everyone stares. When you're in line at the pharmacy and you can't afford your mother's medication. When you're made small because you don't have money. Her voice strengthened. William looked like my grandfather. He looked like my mother in her last days. He looked like every person who's been made invisible by a world that only values wealth. I didn't see a mark or an opportunity. I saw a human being who deserved dignity. How noble, Harrison said with dripping sarcasm. And yet within 24 hours you're named to a $500 million foundation. I didn't know that would happen. You expect us to believe you had no idea who William was? I didn't. I knew him as a regular who ordered coffee and toast, that's all. Harrison pulled out printed documents. But you researched Robert Morgan, the day after William died. After Mr. Sterling told me I was involved in Robert's estate, I was trying to understand what was happening, or calculating how much you stood to gain. Sterling stood. Your Honor, this is badgering. My client has answered the question. Judge Price agreed. Move on, Mr. Harrison. But Harrison had one more attack. Miss Brooks, you were offered settlements. $3 million total. Why did you refuse? Natalie met his eyes. Because William trusted me. Because 42 years of silence and regret deserved to mean something. Because invisible people need someone to fight for them. I'm not for sale, Mr. Harrison. Not for $3 million. Not for any amount. Or you knew you'd get more by waiting. Or I knew that some things matter more than money. Harrison had no response to that. He returned to his table, and Sterling stood for redirect. Miss Brooks, when you paid for William's meal, what did you expect to receive? Nothing. I just wanted him to not be humiliated. Did you expect him to mention you in a will? I didn't know he had a brother. I didn't know anything about the Morgans. What did you lose by refusing the settlement offers? Natalie's voice cracked. Everything. My job, my apartment, my reputation, my sister's safety. My best friend's mother might die because we can't afford her medication. I lost everything except my integrity. Sterling let that sit in the silence. Then, why did you refuse? Because William wrote in his journal that I was the best of us. Because Robert spent 30 years looking for someone to prove humanity wasn't dead. Because if I took that money, they would have died for nothing. Their 42 years of separation would have been meaningless. I couldn't let that happen. No further questions. Natalie returned to her seat, shaking, and Sterling squeezed her shoulder once. Well done. Judge Price called for a recess. I'll issue my ruling in 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Natalie sat in a conference room with Sterling while Elena brought terrible coffee from a vending machine, and Riley paced like she was trying to wear a hole in the floor. You were incredible, Riley said. Nat, you were so strong. But Natalie did not feel strong. She felt hollowed out, exposed. Every vulnerability laid bare in front of strangers who would judge her worth based on a rich man's whims and a dead man's test. Sterling checked his watch. It's time. Back in the courtroom, Judge Price had returned to the bench. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were hard as she looked at Marcus and Victoria. I have reviewed all evidence, she began. I have watched Robert Morgan's video. I have examined Dr. Chen's medical assessment. I have considered the timeline of events. I have listened to testimony from all parties. She paused, letting the tension build. This case presents a question not merely of law, but of character. The plaintiffs claim their father was incompetent, and the defendant is a fraud. The evidence shows the opposite. Judge Price's voice grew stronger. Robert Morgan's video testimony demonstrates beyond any doubt that he was of sound mind. He recited detailed information. He explained complex financial structures. He showed clear, unambiguous intent. The claim of testamentary incapacity is not just unfounded. It is insulting to a man who structured his final wishes with meticulous care. Marcus started to stand. Victoria pulled him down, her face a mask of controlled fury. On the matter of undue influence, Judge Price continued, the evidence shows that Miss Brooks acted with no knowledge of any potential benefit. She paid for a stranger's meal. She passed a test she did not know existed. This is the mechanism functioning exactly as designed. Not manipulation, but proof of concept. The judge's eyes fixed on Marcus and Victoria. Furthermore, the evidence presented by Mr. Sterling shows a consistent pattern of actual undue influence by the plaintiffs themselves. Bank records show embezzlement. Recordings show plots to declare Robert Morgan incompetent. This is the very behavior the law exists to prevent. Judge Price picked up her gavel. Therefore, the last will and testament of Robert Harrison Morgan is hereby affirmed as valid and legally binding. The William and Robert Morgan Foundation is confirmed. Natalie Brooks is confirmed as executive director with all powers and authorities as outlined in the trust documents. The gavel came down like thunder. Additionally, I am awarding all legal fees for the defense to be paid personally and jointly by Marcus Morgan and Victoria Morgan Hartwell. This case was not brought in good faith. It was a cynical attempt to overturn a dying man's clearly expressed wishes. Another crack of the gavel. This court is adjourned. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Elena screamed, actually screamed, and ran from the gallery to hug Natalie. Riley was right behind her, crying and laughing at the same time. Sterling allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Marcus erupted from his seat, his face purple with rage. "This is bullshit! We'll appeal! You're a corrupt hack!" The bailiff moved toward him. Judge Price's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Morgan, you will show respect for this court or I will hold you in contempt. Sit down." "She's a nobody!" Marcus screamed, pointing at Natalie. "This is our money. Our father was insane." "Bailiff, remove Mr. Morgan." As the bailiff grabbed Marcus's arm, Victoria stood slowly, collected her Hermes bag, and walked past Natalie without a word. But she stopped at the door, turned back, and her eyes met Natalie's across the courtroom. For just a moment, something passed between them. Not apology, not friendship, but acknowledgement. Natalie had won, Victoria had lost, and they both knew it. Then Victoria was gone, heels clicking in the hallway, and Marcus was being escorted out, still shouting about appeals and corruption and injustice. In the emptying courtroom, Natalie collapsed into her chair and started crying. Not delicate tears, but huge, gasping sobs of relief and exhaustion, and the sudden, overwhelming weight of responsibility. "You won," Elena kept saying. "Nat, you won. You actually won." Sterling packed his briefcase methodically. "The foundation activates immediately. You'll need to assemble a board, hire staff, begin operations. Are you ready for that?" Natalie wiped her eyes and looked at him. "What's the first thing I do?" "Whatever you want. It's your foundation now." She thought of Elena's mother, of Riley's tuition, of William eating his last meal alone, of Robert spending 30 years searching for proof that humanity was not dead. "The first thing we do," Natalie said, "is make sure no one else becomes invisible." Outside the courthouse, the November sun was breaking through clouds, casting golden light on the marble steps. Reporters swarmed, but Natalie did not care. She stood flanked by Elena and Riley, with Sterling slightly behind her like a guardian, and she faced the cameras with her head high. A reporter shouted a question. "Miss Brooks, how does it feel to win $500 million? "I didn't win $500 million, Natalie said clearly. "I won the right to help people who need it. That's worth more than any amount of money." She walked down the steps, past the reporters, past the strangers, past the gray sedan where the private investigator still sat watching. Let him watch. Let him report back to Marcus and Victoria that the Waitress had won, that kindness had defeated greed, that invisible people had someone fighting for them now. Natalie Brooks, 26 years old, unemployed, homeless, and drowning in debt, had just become the executive director of a $500 million foundation dedicated to helping the forgotten. The test was over, and she had passed. The first board meeting of the William and Robert Morgan Foundation for the Invisible took place 7 days after the verdict, in a conference room Sterling had secured on the 20th floor of a building that overlooked Boston Harbor. Through the windows, November sunlight caught the water and turned it silver. Natalie stood at that window before the meeting started, watching boats move across the harbor, and tried to comprehend that she was no longer a waitress, barely surviving, but the executive director of a foundation with $500 million in assets and the power to change thousands of lives. The transformation still felt like fiction. 1 week ago, she had been homeless, jobless, drowning in debt and desperation. Today, she wore a suit that actually fit, purchased with her first paycheck as director. Today, she had keys to a 2-bedroom condo the foundation owned for her use. Today, she could pay Riley's tuition and Elena's mother's medical bills, and the pink-highlighted utility bill that had started this entire impossible journey. But the weight of responsibility made breathing difficult. $500 million meant 500 million ways to fail. $20 million per year in grants meant 20 million decisions about who deserved help and who would be turned away. The invisible people of Boston were counting on her to see them, and Natalie was terrified she would look right past someone the way the world had looked past William for 42 years. Sterling entered the conference room carrying his eternal briefcase and the calm certainty that had guided Natalie through the trial. Behind him came three people Natalie had spent the past week interviewing, vetting, and ultimately trusting with William and Robert's legacy. Dr. Patricia Chen, the neurologist who had assessed Robert's competency, was 62, with steel gray hair, and the gentle authority of someone who had spent decades helping people at their most vulnerable. She had agreed to serve on the board because, as she told Natalie during their interview, she had watched too many elderly patients become invisible to families who only saw them as inconvenient or expensive. Marcus Williams, no relation to the other Marcus, was a 70-year-old former social worker who had spent 40 years in Boston's elder care system. He was Black, Boston-born, and carried the kind of street wisdom that came from seeing the city from the bottom up rather than the top down. He understood poverty not as an abstract concept, but as daily reality. And when Natalie had asked him why he wanted to join the board, he had said simply, "Because I've been invisible too. I know what it costs." And Elena Cruz, who sat at the conference table with the expression of someone who still could not quite believe this was real. Natalie had insisted Elena be named Director of Operations with a salary of $85,000 per year. Elena had cried when Natalie made the offer, had tried to refuse, had finally accepted when Natalie pointed out that the foundation needed someone who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for people you loved. "Shall we begin?" Sterling asked, taking his seat at the head of the table. Natalie sat beside him and opened the leather portfolio Elena had given her as a gift. Inside were notes, budgets, and a list of the first 50 people who needed help. The list had been compiled from referrals, from social workers, from churches and community centers, and the invisible network of people who knew where poverty lived because they lived there too. "First order of business," Natalie said, and her voice only shook a little. "Elena's mother, Maria Cruz, she has MS. Her medication costs $800 a month, and insurance won't cover it. I move that the foundation establish a medical assistance fund, and that Maria Cruz be the first recipient with full coverage for life." Dr. Chen nodded. "I second the motion." "All in favor?" 5 hands rose, unanimous. Elena put her face in her hands and sobbed. Natalie reached over and squeezed her shoulder, remembering the night Elena had told her about hospice conversations, about a 54-year-old woman contemplating death because her daughter could not afford pills. "Thank you," Elena whispered. "Thank you." "Second order," Natalie continued, her throat tight. "We have 12 elderly individuals facing eviction within 30 days. All are on fixed incomes. All are being displaced by rent increases they cannot afford. I propose we secure apartments for all 12 and cover the first year's rent plus security deposits. Estimated cost, $180,000. Marcus Williams pulled out reading glasses and studied the list. "These are good people. I know 3 of them personally. Mrs. Keating, she used to volunteer at the soup kitchen before her arthritis got too bad. This is exactly the kind of help they need." "Motion to approve?" Sterling asked. "Approved," Dr. Chen said. Another unanimous vote. 12 lives saved from homelessness with a single decision. Natalie had spent 3 years at Harbor Light Diner scraping together tips to survive, and now she could approve $180,000 in 5 minutes. The mathematics of power and privilege felt obscene and necessary in equal measure. "Third order," Natalie said, and this one was harder. "I want to preserve apartment 4B at the Westminster Building as a memorial. Keep it exactly as it is. Once a year, on the anniversary of William's death, we hold a private remembrance there. Just the board and anyone who knew William, to remember why we do this work." Silence around the table. Then Sterling spoke, his voice softer than usual. "Robert would have appreciated that. He kept that apartment frozen for 42 years as a reminder of his failure. You're transforming it into a reminder of redemption." "All in favor?" 5 hands again. The memorial was established. They worked through the agenda for 2 hours, approving programs and budgets and the framework for a foundation that would serve thousands: medical assistance, housing support, food security, transportation for elderly who could no longer drive, a visiting program where volunteers checked on isolated elderly, making sure they were eating and taking medications, and had someone who knew their names. As the meeting ended and people gathered their papers, Dr. Chen approached Natalie. "You're doing something important here. Robert chose well." "I hope so. I'm terrified I'll miss someone who needs help." "You will," Dr. Chen said gently. "You can't save everyone, but you can save enough people that the trying matters. That's all any of us can do." After everyone left, Natalie and Elena stood at the window watching the sun set over Boston Harbor, painting the water orange and gold. "My mom cried when I told her," Elena said quietly. "She hasn't cried in 2 years. She said she thought she would die without seeing her grandchildren grow up. Now she thinks she might make it." "She'll make it," Natalie said. "We'll make sure of it." Elena turned to face her. "You know this is insane, right? 1 month ago, we were sleeping on my couch wondering where next week's rent was coming from. Now you're approving $100,000 budgets like it's normal." "It doesn't feel normal. It feels like I'm going to wake up and find out this was a dream, and I'm still at Harbor Light trying to make $80 in tips." "If it's a dream, don't wake up, because this is the best thing that's ever happened to people like us." People like us, the invisible ones, the waitresses and social workers and struggling families who fell through every crack in the system because the system was designed to have cracks. Natalie thought of William's journal entry. "After 42 years of being invisible, a stranger saw me. The foundation's entire purpose was to make sure no one stayed invisible that long again." On Saturday, exactly 1 week after the verdict, Natalie returned to Harbor Light Diner for the first time since being fired. She entered through the front door at 11:30, the Saturday lunch rush building, and the place smelled exactly the same: coffee and grease and the dreams of people who could not afford better. Frank Patterson was behind the counter. He looked up when the door chimed, and his face went through several emotions in quick succession: surprise, guilt, fear. He set down his order pad and walked over slowly, like approaching a live grenade. "Natalie, I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm not here to cause trouble, Frank. I'm here as a customer." "Listen, about the firing, corporate made me. I didn't have a choice." Natalie held up a hand. "I know, I'm not angry. I understand you were protecting your other employees. That's what a good manager does." Frank's shoulders sagged with relief. "You really mean that?" "I really do. Can I get table 6? The corner booth. William's table." Frank's eyes widened as he understood. "Of course. Take as long as you need." Natalie slid into the booth where William had sat for 3 weeks, where he had solved crossword puzzles and talked about Gatsby, and slowly, carefully, built enough trust to test whether one person in the city would show him kindness. The vinyl was cracked in the same places. The table wobbled the same way. Nothing had changed except everything. A new waitress approached, young and tired and wearing the same expression Natalie had worn for 3 years. The expression of someone calculating tips and rent, and whether this shift would be enough to survive. "What can I get you?" the girl asked. "Black coffee and wheat toast, dry." The girl wrote it down and disappeared. When she returned with the order, Natalie paid with her credit card. The foundation's credit card, technically, issued in her name, with a limit she still could not comprehend. The total was $4.50. Natalie left a $100 tip. The girl stared at the receipt. "Miss, I think you made a mistake." "No mistake. You look like you're working hard. I remember what that's like." "I can't accept this much." "Yes, you can. And when you're able, pass it forward. Help someone else who needs it." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed this today." "I think I do." As Natalie sat drinking her coffee in William's booth, Frank approached again, this time with a manila folder. "Can I show you something?" Inside the folder were photographs, Harbor Light Diner staff over the years. Frank pointed to one from 15 years ago, black and white, showing a younger version of himself behind the counter, with a man in a tweed coat visible in the background. "That's William Morgan," Frank said. "He's been coming here for 15 years, not 3 weeks, 15 years. I never connected the dots until after the trial. He was always at table 6, always ordered the same thing, and I never really saw him. None of us did." Natalie studied the photograph. William looked younger, less frail, but already carrying that profound loneliness. 15 years of coming to the same diner and being invisible to everyone except the staff who took his order and forgot him the moment he left. "I'm sorry I fired you," Frank said. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. You saw him, really saw him, and I didn't." "You're seeing now. That counts for something." Frank hesitated, then pulled out a business card. "If your foundation ever needs anything, volunteer space, meal programs, whatever, Harbor Light is available. It's the least I can do." Natalie took the card. "I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Frank." She finished her coffee slowly, savoring the terrible taste, and when she left, she walked past the new waitress and whispered, "You're doing great. Keep going." In the months that followed, the foundation grew from concept to reality. Natalie hired staff, assembled programs, met with social workers and church leaders and community organizers who knew where the invisible people lived. The foundation rented office space in a building that had once been a factory, converted now into affordable workspace for nonprofits. It was not fancy, but it was real, with actual desks and computers and a staff of 12 people who believed that human dignity was worth fighting for. Riley enrolled for spring semester with her tuition fully paid. She changed her major from business to social work, inspired by watching her sister transform suffering into purpose. Elena's mother started a new medication regimen. Her tremors decreased, and she began volunteering at the foundation office 2 days a week, answering phones and telling callers in her warm accent that someone cared whether they lived or died. By February, the foundation had served 200 people. By April, 500. Housing assistance, medical care, food programs, transportation services, a visiting program where volunteers checked on isolated elderly, making sure they were eating and taking medications, and had someone who knew their names. And every month, Natalie reviewed applications personally, read every story, saw every face, because the moment the foundation stopped seeing individuals and started seeing numbers was the moment William's death would become meaningless. In May, Sterling called with unexpected news. Marcus Morgan declared bankruptcy, gambling debts, the legal fees from the trial finished him. He's lost everything. Natalie felt no satisfaction, just sadness. What about Victoria? Still fighting. She filed an appeal, but it was rejected. She's running out of options and money. Does she need help? Sterling was quiet for a moment. You're serious? The foundation helps invisible people. If Victoria becomes one of them, she qualifies. She tried to destroy you. I know. But Robert wanted to help people like William, and William forgave Robert even though they wasted 42 years being angry. Maybe it's time to stop the cycle. Sterling did not push. He had learned over the months that Natalie's moral compass pointed directions he did not always understand but had learned to trust. November returned like a season of reckoning. 1 year since William had walked into Harbor Light Diner for his last meal. 1 year since Natalie had made a choice that cost $87 and changed the trajectory of thousands of lives. On November 15th, the anniversary of William's death, Natalie gathered the board at apartment 4B. They climbed the stairs of the Westminster building, unlocked the door with the brass key Natalie now wore on a chain around her neck, and entered the frozen memorial to 2 brothers who had loved and lost each other. The apartment was exactly as they had left it, dust-covered, time stopped, a shrine to regret, and the possibility of redemption. Natalie had brought William's journal. She opened it to the last entry and read aloud in the dusty silence. She paid. This young woman, barely older than my students, paid $87 she could not afford. I saw it in her eyes. It hurt her to do it. She was counting on that money, and she did it anyway. After 42 years of invisibility, a stranger saw me. It felt like forgiveness. She closed the journal. This year, the foundation served over 3,000 people. We provided housing for 400, medical care for 600, food assistance for 1,000, transportation, counseling, companionship, dignity, all because one old man decided to test whether kindness still existed. Dr. Chen lit a candle and placed it on the mahogany desk. To William Morgan, may his invisibility never be forgotten. Marcus Williams added a second candle. To Robert Morgan, may his regret become our redemption. Elena placed a third. To everyone we've helped, may they never be invisible again. They stood in silence for 10 minutes, honoring the dead and the living, the past and the future. the cost of pride, and the power of forgiveness. As they prepared to leave, Natalie's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Brooks? A woman's voice, familiar. This is Victoria Morgan Hartwell. Natalie's breath caught. She stepped into the hallway, away from the others. Victoria, I wanted to call on today of all days, the anniversary. I've been thinking about my uncle, about my father, about everything that happened. Why are you calling? To apologize and to ask for help. Silence. Then Victoria continued, her voice stripped of the aristocratic confidence, just exhaustion and something that might have been genuine humility. I lost my appeal. I am being sued by creditors. My third husband left and took half of what I had left. I'm facing eviction from my condo. I'm 44 years old, and I've never actually worked a day in my life. I don't know how to survive without money. Natalie thought of pink highlighted bills, of eviction notices, of the terror of not knowing where next month's rent would come from. I'm not asking for a handout, Victoria said quickly. I'm asking for what you give everyone else, a chance. Your foundation helps people who've become invisible. I'm becoming invisible and I'm terrified. What do you need? Job placement assistance. Your website says you help with that. I need someone to teach me how to write a resume, how to interview, how to do the things I've never had to do because I always had my father's money. Natalie felt Elena's presence behind her, listening, felt the weight of William's journal in her bag, felt the ghost of Robert Morgan watching to see what she would do with the power he had given her. Send me your information, Natalie said. We'll set up an appointment. No promises except that we'll try to help. Victoria's breath shuddered with relief. Thank you. I don't deserve your kindness, but thank you. Everyone deserves kindness. That's the whole point. After Victoria hung up, Elena raised her eyebrows. Are you really going to help her? William forgave Robert. Robert forgave himself by creating this foundation. If I refuse to help Victoria because of anger, I'm just continuing the cycle of punishment. Someone has to choose forgiveness. You're either a saint or insane. Probably both. They returned to the memorial, said their final goodbyes to the apartment, and locked it behind them. As Natalie descended the Westminster Building stairs, she thought about circles. William had eaten at Harbor Light for 15 years. Invisible. Natalie had served invisible people for 3 years. Robert had watched his brother suffer for 42 years. And now Victoria was learning what invisibility felt like. But circles could be broken. Forgiveness could interrupt cycles. Kindness could be chosen even when anger was easier. 5 years passed like seasons, each one building on the last. The foundation expanded beyond Boston, Providence, Hartford, Worcester. Anywhere invisible people suffered in silence. The staff grew to 75. The annual budget reached $26 million. Over 15,000 people received help in those 5 years. Apartments secured, medical bills paid, food delivered, loneliness addressed through visiting programs and community centers where elderly could gather without judgment. Natalie was 31 now, though she felt both younger and older. Younger because the foundation had given her life purpose and meaning beyond survival. Older because she carried the weight of 15,000 stories, 15,000 lives she had touched but could not completely save. Riley graduated from Boston University with a degree in social work and immediately joined the foundation staff. Elena's mother celebrated her 60th birthday in good health, her MS managed by medications the foundation provided. Frank Patterson turned Harbor Light Diner into a community resource, offering free meals to elderly every Sunday, funded by foundation grants. And Victoria Morgan Hartwell, after 2 years of job placement assistance and therapy and learning to live on a social worker's salary, became a volunteer. She visited isolated elderly in their homes, bringing groceries and conversation, and the hard-won understanding that money meant nothing compared to human connection. She would never be friends with Natalie. The wounds were too deep, but they were no longer enemies. They were two women who understood that invisibility respected no class boundaries, and forgiveness was the only weapon against generational anger. On a Tuesday in November, 5 years after William's death, Natalie stood on the steps of Boston City Hall receiving an award. The mayor was speaking, calling her a humanitarian, a visionary, a woman who had transformed suffering into service. The audience of 500 included foundation staff, board members, and hundreds of people whose lives had been changed by William and Robert's test. But Natalie barely heard the words. She was thinking about a night 5 years ago when she had $25 in her bank account and had just made the stupidest decision of her life. She was thinking about William's sad, grateful eyes and Robert's letter, and Sterling's warning that this would be a burden, not a gift. They had been right about the burden. Every person the foundation could not help felt like personal failure. Every elderly person who died alone before the foundation found them haunted Natalie's dreams. The work was endless and insufficient and the only thing worth doing. When the mayor handed her the Crystal Award, Natalie accepted it with grace and gave a speech she had written the night before. 5 years ago, I was a waitress who paid $87 I couldn't afford for an old man's dinner. That decision cost me my job, my apartment, and my peace of mind. But it gave me something infinitely more valuable, a purpose. She looked out at the crowd, finding Elena and Riley in the front row, finding Sterling near the back with his small, proud smile, finding faces of people who had been helped and were now helping others. William and Robert Morgan were brothers who spent 42 years in silence because pride was more important than love. They died with that regret. But before they died, they created a test, a way to prove that human decency still existed. I was lucky enough to pass that test, but the real test continues every day. Will we see the invisible people around us? Will we help when it costs us something? Will we choose kindness over convenience? Her voice strengthened. This foundation has served 15,000 people in 5 years, but there are millions more who are invisible. Elderly living alone, veterans forgotten, poor families struggling in silence. We can't save everyone, but we can save enough people that the trying matters. That's all William wanted, to be seen, to matter, to know that someone cared. She held up the Crystal Award. This isn't mine. It belongs to every person who chose kindness when cruelty was easier, to every volunteer who gives time, to every donor who gives money, to everyone who refuses to look away from suffering. As the applause rose, Natalie thought of William sitting in his apartment at 11:47 p.m., writing his last journal entry, dying alone, but dying at peace because a stranger had seen him. She thought of Robert recording his video, hoping against hope that somewhere in this cruel city, one person would prove him wrong about humanity. They had both been right. The world was cruel, but it was also capable of extraordinary kindness if someone was brave enough to start. After the ceremony, Natalie escaped to a quiet hallway and checked her phone. One new email, from an address she did not recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you." She opened it. "Miss Brooks, this is Victoria. I wanted you to know that today I visited an elderly woman named Margaret Chen. She's 92, living alone. Her family has forgotten her. I brought her groceries and we talked for 2 hours about her late husband and her garden and the grandchildren who never call. When I left, she said I was the only person who had visited her in 6 months. She said I made her feel visible. I thought you would want to know that your father's test is still working. People can change, even people like me. Thank you for giving me the chance to try. Victoria." Natalie read the email twice, then forwarded it to Sterling with a simple note. "Robert would be proud." His response came immediately. "He already is." That night, Natalie drove to Mount Hope Cemetery, where William was buried. She had not visited since the day of his funeral, when only she and Sterling and 2 strangers from his building had attended. His gravestone was simple gray granite with words Natalie had chosen. William Harrison Morgan, 1937 to 2024. Teacher, brother, friend. Finally seen. She sat on the bench beside his grave and talked to him the way she had talked to him at Harbor Light, knowing he could not answer but needing to speak anyway. "We helped 15,000 people in 5 years. Not enough, never enough, but maybe enough that you can rest. Maybe enough that 42 years of silence means something now. Elena's mother is alive because of you. Riley is a social worker because of you. Thousands of people have homes and medicine, and someone who knows their names because you were brave enough to walk into that diner and let yourself be humiliated one more time to test whether anyone cared." She placed flowers on his grave, chrysanthemums, his favorite according to his journal. "I'm sorry I didn't know you better. I'm sorry I only got 3 weeks. But William, those 3 weeks changed everything. You changed everything. You proved that one person can matter, that one act of kindness can echo for years, that invisibility is not permanent if someone is willing to really look." The November wind was cold, but the sun was setting gold and beautiful, and Natalie sat with William's memory until full dark, saying goodbye and thank you, and I hope you're proud of what we built from the ashes of your loneliness. On the drive home, Natalie passed Harbor Light Diner. Through the window, she could see Frank behind the counter, see the new waitress who Natalie had tipped, see table 6 where an elderly woman sat alone reading a newspaper and drinking coffee that had probably gone cold. Natalie almost stopped, almost went in, but the woman looked content, not lonely. And sometimes the kindest thing was to let people be alone without assuming they needed saving. Back at her condo, the one the foundation owned, but that felt like home now, Natalie made tea and sat at her desk with William's journal. She had read it cover to cover dozens of times, but tonight she read it again, tracing the evolution of a man who had started out hopeful and slowly, over 42 years, been worn down by invisibility until he was ready to die, if it meant proving one person still had kindness in them. The final entry never stopped breaking her heart. "Tell her thank you. Tell her she's the best of us. Tell her I'm sorry for what's coming." "I'm not the best of us," Natalie whispered to the empty room. "But I'm trying. I hope that's enough." Her phone buzzed. Riley, sending a photo. Their mother's grave, which Riley had visited today, with fresh flowers and a note that read, "Mom, Nat's helping thousands of people now. She made your sacrifice mean something. We miss you. We're okay." Natalie started crying, the kind of quiet tears that came from grief and gratitude mixed together. Her mother had died believing her daughter would never finish nursing school, never escape poverty, never amount to anything more than a waitress drowning in debt. She had died not knowing that her lessons about kindness and seeing people and refusing to look away from suffering would become the foundation of a multi-million-dollar organization dedicated to making invisible people visible. "I hope you're proud, Mom," Natalie said to the photograph. "I hope you and William are wherever good people go when they die. And I hope you know that every person we help is because you taught me that everyone deserves to be seen." The city lights of Boston glittered outside her window. 500,000 people lived in this city. Thousands of them were invisible, suffering in silence, waiting for someone to notice they existed. The foundation could not help them all, but it could help enough that the trying mattered. And tomorrow, Natalie would wake up and try again. She would read applications and approve grants and meet with people whose stories would break her heart and remind her why $87 had been the best investment she had ever made. Because William had been right. After 42 years of invisibility, a stranger had finally seen him. And in seeing him, Natalie had learned to see everyone. The elderly woman at the grocery store counting change for bread, the veteran on the corner with the cardboard sign, the single mother at the food bank pretending she was okay when she was one paycheck from disaster. They were all William. They were all invisible until someone chose to look. And Natalie Brooks, former waitress, current director of the William and Robert Morgan Foundation, had learned that the most important thing in life was not money or success or awards or recognition. It was seeing people, really seeing them, and letting them know that someone in this vast and different city knew their names and cared whether they lived or died. That was William's gift. That was Robert's redemption. That was the test that never ended because every day brought new opportunities to choose kindness over apathy, to choose connection over isolation, to choose to see instead of looking away. Natalie set down the journal and looked at her reflection in the dark window. She looked older, tired, but also fulfilled in a way that 26-year-old version of herself, terrified and broken, desperate, could never have imagined. "Thank you, William," she said one last time, "for trusting me, for testing me, for proving that one person's kindness can change the world." Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, Natalie Brooks, no longer invisible, turned off the light and went to bed knowing that tomorrow She would wake up and continue the work of making sure no one else spent 42 years being invisible, because she had been seen, and now it was her turn to see others. That was the legacy. That was the gift. That was the answer to the test. And it would echo for generations.